Yeah,
Go on.
I tried to I had to log in like multiple times, and every time I logged in, it then kicked back and said, sorry, but we're
Yeah.
experiencing technical issues. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, that sucks. That sucks very much indeed, YouTube.
Oh, aye, the joys.
So Happy New
Um,
Year. Happy New Year. It is the year of the fire horse.
oh, it isn't all. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
telling people, what was it, in Beijing? They were telling people not to be wearing red this year because it could be bad, too much red energy. So they were
Right.
like, wear green or brown this year instead.
Right.
Because you said there, the fire horse.
The
So people
fire
were already
horse.
going to be wearing red for the horse, and then they were going to be wearing more red for the new year itself.
Right.
So instead, all of the how do you pronounce it properly? Feng Shui. The
You talking about feng shui?
yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
They were going around telling people this year wear more greens and more browns. So I had my green T-shirt from yesterday, so I was wearing that for all
Great.
of yesterday. Yeah.
Greens and browns to balance the elements of the universe. Yeah.
Oh,
We were just we just went to Thailand, and we had 2 long layovers in Hanoi, and at the airport I posted a video of this on my travel channel. They have
mm,
the most amazing red dragon sculpture you can imagine.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like it's 60 feet long, and you walk under it, and it's suspended from the ceiling,
Ooh.
and it's this gorgeous piece of sculpted styrofoam, and it's beautifully painted. It's stunning.
Mm.
It was definitely a fun thing to do while waiting 12 hours in Vietnam to catch my connection.
Oh, stop. Myself and Yuki, anytime we go over to your channel, both on Instagram and on, what was it called? YouTube as well. And you posted stuff on TikTok as well, did you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Ah, nice,
I'm
nice.
everywhere. I'm omnipresent.
Nice, nice. But yeah, anytime myself and Yuki would see what you were up to over your holiday, oh, so jealous. Really, really jealous. What was your
Yeah.
favorite thing you were up to?
Oh well, we took this traditional Lana cooking. So northern Thailand was the Lana Kingdom. Siam was
Mm.
the southern part of
Yeah.
Thailand. So the culture up in the
Ah.
north is actually completely different. And
Mm.
the food is different. So we actually took this traditional Lana cooking course like all day,
Yeah.
and it was slow food. So everything was made from scratch. We used a mortar and pestle. We used cleavers to chop meat. We cooked on a clay stove over coals using clay pots.
Mm.
We used a mill stone, a hand grinder to make coconut milk rice pancakes by pouring the rice right into the grinding stone and then pouring in coconut milk and grinding. And
Mm.
that made the batter. There was no mixing. It was all mixed in the grinding stone.
Geez, that sounds
And
awesome.
it was so awesome. And there were 7 of us participants, and everyone made different things. And so
Mm.
at the end of the day, we had this feast where we got
Yeah.
to taste everyone's dishes. And frankly, it was too much food. We all
Yeah.
we we're like, we're tourists. We're in a hotel room. We don't really have reheating facilities, so taking home leftovers is not really much of an option for us.
Mm.
So, that was definitely one of the highlights. It was also nice because the woman who owns this farm where she teaches her classes, it's literally her family's recipes she's teaching us. She's teaching us her mother's and her grandmother's and her great grandmother's recipes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like one of these cooking schools where it's just like a quick, what am I thinking? A mass produced tourist experience. Because
Mm.
she literally picked us up in her car from our hotel, drove us out to her farm outside of Chiang Mai, and then we spent the whole day at her farm with her. We drank, we chatted, we ate together, and then she drove us back, and we
Oh,
chatted more on the way back. So nothing felt artificial or manufactured. It felt like a real, genuine, welcome to my home, let's cook.
damn
It was
it.
great.
So lucky. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was great. And the price was, of course, for Thai people, the price would have been unaffordable for most people. But for us who earn, currencies from developed countries,
Mm.
I think I calculated it was $55 a person for an 8-hour cooking workshop, which included a market tour, by the way. So she
Jesus.
took us to this wet market, and we went grocery shopping for our class.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so we actually went to the butcher who was literally butchering a pig as we watched.
Mm.
And she was like, yeah, I need 3 kilograms of intestines so we can make the sauce. Oh, we made sausage from
Mm.
scratch. and
Nice.
and I need those pig's heart and that liver, and we need some of those kidneys and the pork belly. And then the power went out in the middle of our market tour, and you can tell that everyone knew this was going to happen. All of the food vendors, all of the stalls broke out candles.
All right. Yeah, so it's
So
just standard.
standard procedure, same
Yeah, yeah.
procedure as every year. And so we had a middle of the morning candlelit tour of
Mm.
this fresh market in Chiang Mai. It was a great experience.
Yeah, I
And
say so. All right.
yeah, now I can make those own recipes myself after spending all day making three. We made three main dishes and a dessert. And
Mm, mm,
yeah,
mm.
it was pretty amazing, I would say. But
Aye.
one of the weirdest things we encountered were toilets in the forest. I don't know if
Oh
you.
yeah, I seen that. I was there cycling through what was it, the old tickety talk, and then I seen you going, found some toilets in the forest, and I was like, where are you? Like, what are you doing? Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I seen you doing that. What were you up to? What was going on?
We were hiking to the top of this mountain called
Mm.
Doi Sutep, which has a beautiful temple midway up and then at the top. And we were given bad information by one of the
Oh.
locals about what was the hiking trail. So they sent us up this 4-lane road that
Mm.
went up the mountain. And we were starting, I'm like, I'm not going to hike multiple miles up this mountain with cars rushing next to me. That's a non-starter for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that's not peaceful or enjoyable. And it was sunburnt, and there were like the trees were not over the road. So just as we were getting ready to turn around and head back down, we turn left, and there Ryan says there are toilets in the woods. And I thought he meant like, you know, outhouses.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, 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 they're not outhouses. There's no houses. There
Yeah,
were
yeah.
toilets on a concrete platform with a hole underneath of them,
Wait,
basically.
wait, wait. They're all plugged up.
I mean, they worked hypothetically.
What? No
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
That's wild.
they hypothetically worked. They weren't flushing though. There was no
Oh,
running water.
okay.
So basically, someone put a toilet that doesn't have any water just as a nice place to sit on so you can do your business while you're walking up the side of this mountain. And yeah, there was some pretty strange stains on some of them, so we didn't get too close.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
in case.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of diseases through that kind of stuff, especially
yeah.
out there.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, thank you.
everyone is saying there's just problems on YouTube as well. I don't know what is going on with YouTube right now, so it's probably
Yeah,
affecting. Hopefully, it's not affecting our numbers too much. I was having the same problem as well. I had to go around. What I
yeah.
did is I clicked on subscribers on the laptop on the right side, sorry, left side, and then from there I was able to access all of my stuff and then turn on my what was it called? The fact I'm being paid right now, my monetization and stuff. So
Oh,
I had
right.
to
Yeah.
go around because I was looking at the screen for ages, going, "Geez, about 10 minutes or so." Before I was like, "Oh, I think YouTube is down." So I started
Yeah.
finding alternate ways to get around the problem to fix it. But yeah, I managed to fix it all right. So I'm being paid right now. That's the main thing.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what's happening with YouTube this morning.
Mm.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see what happens, everyone. Hopefully, it won't be too disruptive to our medieval buzz experience because we've got some fun things to chat about today. I think we've got
Yeah.
some very interesting discussion upon which we are about to embark.
Yeah, I didn't tell you. You do know Metatron. He didn't directly reply to me, but he literally a few hours after I posted my short on, he's altered it, right. And he's gone down the media perspective, and he hasn't done any actual proper research. So he's
Right.
literally referring it to the Anglo-Saxons didn't exist, debunking
uh,
Cambridge University, right? Which I this did you read my comments, by the way?
yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
like, where's this information from? Because that's not actually accurate. No one is saying the Anglo-Saxons didn't
Didn't
exist. The
exist.
problem is that the Anglo-Saxons were never unified. Like, they never unified themselves together. And I know people will turn around and says, "Oh yeah, But Alfred the Great, he talks about unifying the Anglo-Saxons. And then you have, what was it called? Ethelstan also, quote unquote, unify the Anglo-Saxons and stuff. But he doesn't unify the Anglo-Saxons in a
Yeah.
centralized monarchy that you see later on with the likes of William the Conqueror, and then later on again with the
Well,
likes of Henry
and
VIII.
and by the time you get around to a kingdom that looks more like what we know as England, right?
Yeah,
They're calling themselves Engoland,
yeah,
right? There, it's no longer the Saxon part has dropped off. Um,
yeah.
and for me, I'm a linguist, as you
Mm,
know, and many of you know, I'm a professional translator by trade. So I always want to get to the core of the language. Where does this term come from? And
mm,
I thought, I used to think until very recently that Anglo-Saxon was actually a modern historian term, but it's not.
mm.
It's a term from the 8th century. The Venerable Bede is the one who quoted it,
Yeah.
and he was writing to do that in a way because he needed to distinguish in his histories between the old Saxons.
Mm,
And literally, that's how he calls them. Like, that's not me. Don't blame me. I'm just reporting what the Venerable Bede said. He
mm,
referred to the old Saxons, meaning the Saxons who were still in Germany, basically, in what is now Germany, right? The ones who are on the continent. And
mm,
between the new Saxons, the ones who were in what we now call England, right? So he coins this term Anglo-Saxon. So
mm,
it's actually a very old term, much older than I thought. And
mm.
it's one that gets used very heavily for several centuries until eventually it just kind of disappears. It just stops. People stop using that. By people, I mean historians, because obviously we don't have any recordings of conversations
Mm.
um, that happen between the average Joe Schmo in the village square.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, the question is how, it's how is it used? How do we use the term? Is it the same way and in the same context that they would have used the term? Because if not, then maybe we should reconsider its
Mm.
use.
Yeah.
Um,
At the same time, though, right? So, to even start with, if anybody's wondering what's my interpretation on Metatron and my reaction to Metatron, which he said about 5 hours ago, I completely disagree with everything Metatron said in his video, and I think it was just full on lazy. Journal, what was it called? Research, to be honest with you. He quoted from the Daily Telegraph, New Zealand, and the article was Anglo Saxons never existed. And it basically tries to make out that the students, well, the University of Cambridge are a bunch of radical left wingers that woke up one day and were like, we ethnically hate the white people. No one is saying anything whatsoever
oh my
about
god!
hating the ethnic white people. No
Oh
one
my god!
ever said anything about that, right? The second thing as well, no one is denying the Anglo Saxons existed, right? The problem, no, don't get me wrong, the society, so this debate starts back in 2017. In 2017, the what was it called, the Society of Early English Studies turned around and said, they wanted to make 2 points. Their first major point was that the Anglo-Saxons were never a unified ethnic group. Okay, that was their first main concern, which
Right,
is
right.
true. If you go into East Anglia, Northumberland, and Wessex, they all have their own unique culture and ethnic identity. They also mix in with the local population as well, which is massively forgotten. And by the way, Metatron in his own video actually agreed with that they did mix with the. He trips over it, by the way, while he's trying to what was it called, debate this. He trips over explaining this, so I know he knows that what he's saying is inaccurate, and he's just rushing to get them views and stuff. That's his ultimate goal.
I mean,
The video,
unfortunately, that is the ecosystem in which we operate. It
yeah,
sucks, but
mm,
I can't really blame him for that necessarily,
yeah.
sadly.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. We all rush out content, but I can still massively disagree with the content as well. He
Absolutely.
rushes out.
100%.
Yeah. So anyway, regardless, the problem is not only does the likes of East Anglia, Wessex, and Northumberland have their own unique, distinct identity because they're made up of different Saxon groups, different Juts groups, and different
Yeah.
Anglo groups. But on
Yeah.
top of that as well, they're also mixing in with different Celtic groups as well. Because even when the Romans were appearing into the area, you have different groups of, what was it called? Those, oh, I know the Iceni. The other Celtic groups now are popped completely out of my head, but regardless, there were different Celtic groups in those
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
areas even before the arrival of the Romans, and those groups stayed there. They didn't just magically pop and disappear out in the oceans.
No.
Even today,
Yeah.
there's still genetics that go all the way back. That this is the funny little twist where these magic right wingers who haven't done any form of research are trying to make out that they're trying to delete and remove. They're actually not. They're trying to highlight the local identity in those areas. So they're actually these who the media is branding as radical left wingers who's trying to remove white identity are actually trying to do the complete opposite to what the media is saying. And that is,
Right.
no, there's not just non-removal going on, but in fact highlighting of the local identity in those areas. Complete opposite to what the media is saying.
Right. And that's, that's someone commented sea dragon, May sea dragon, my sea
Mm.
dragon, made a really great comment, Mars sea dragon, that Metatron has this weird political axe to grind that has no place in a history discussion, right?
Yeah.
And just the facts. And so I agree with that 100%. I really hate when history nowadays, when history gets
Mm.
twisted for political ends. On the other hand, the reality of the study of history is that, it's not like we have an objective, unbiased record from even in the time, right? The
Mm.
chroniclers in most places throughout the world aren't writing to keep an objective history.
Mm.
They're writing with some kind of usually political goal in mind. So that can actually make it challenging for us who study history to have an unbiased view of the history because the people recording it weren't unbiased.
Mm.
So, it can get really twisty to find just the facts, I guess is my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the facts, what the facts are, can change based on new resources, new discoveries, archaeological,
100%.
documentary evidence. So
Mm.
yeah, I totally agree. History should be just the facts, but we have to be prepared for new facts to completely revise the way we view our past. Yeah,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
is my point there.
Now, ultimately, I do fully agree with what the what was it, Early English Studies Society is trying to push forward since 2017. Now, they tried organizing themselves in 2017, and then they pushed for a vote in 2019. The society itself agreed to push for the name change. Right now, this is the part where I actually do disagree. I personally do disagree with the
So wait.
society itself.
I think we should lay this out. So if you could just bring everyone briefly up to speed, what is this big change that is being proposed with the term Anglo-Saxon? It's being removed, but from where and in what context?
So the society itself, this, by the way, goes back to, or what was it, 2017. So in 2017, and then in 2019, they took action in,
Who is they, by the way,
which
just
is
for clarity
the,
for our viewers.
oh yeah, yeah, of course, for the Early English Society, right?
Right.
The society, which are a bunch of young students. So the young students themselves are pushing the actual department. So, what is the actual department? The actual department is called the Anglo-Saxon Norse Celtic Department. Okay,
Hmm.
that is the actual what was it called? Early English Studies in
Right.
England. That's what it's called, and they want to change the name to Early English Studies. So they want to change it from, what was it called, Anglo-Saxon Celtic, what was it? Anglo-Saxon Norse Celtic Department into Early English
Yeah.
studies. That's what they want to change it into.
I'm going to tell you that just from a linguistic perspective, that change is wonderful. That's
Oh, really?
the old name was terrible. Like that's
Yeah,
so
go on.
clunky. I mean, think about it. The way that
Yeah.
sounds, it's so clunky. What a clunky department name. It does not flow off of the tongue. It trips out of your mouth like you're vomiting. Right? That's
That's true.
terrible. So from a stylistic perspective, I support any change.
Yeah.
Actually, go on.
No, to be honest with you, the problem I have with early, because their ultimate goal as well, and this is why I kind of do disagree with it. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that name was very, very clunky. But then, like, how do you solve my problem? Which is, I kind of the problem I have with early English studies then is the fact that they're like the ultimate goal for them was to be more inclusive, and I just think
Mhm.
the early English studies isn't as inclusive, especially
Mm.
when it kind of leaves out the Norse side of the studies and the Celtic side of the study. What's your interpretation of that? Because you seem to have frowned slightly.
No, I'm thinking. That's this. It's not.
Oh, right, right, right.
That's my pensive look. People misread my face all the time. That's my
I get that
pensive
all the
look.
time as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's my pensive look. Um, so I guess here's the question: is the department focused on studying is the focus on English history, but in terms of how those peoples interacted to help create English history, or is
Mm,
the focus of that department to study all of those peoples, even in their own native land? So, the Norse in Scandinavia, the Celts in Germany in the
mm,
fifth century BC, right? Because otherwise, if the focus is actually on how those peoples made England basically and influenced English history and culture and development, then I
mm.
could see that calling it early English history studies or just early English studies.
I
Is
think
it
it's
early
just
English studies?
called, for the time being, I think it's the Early English Studies for the time
Right.
being.
Okay,
It
so
could
my
be
my
changed to
my
Early English
objection there
Department.
is that sounds like English language,
Yeah, yeah,
actually.
yeah. That's the
Um,
problem I have with it.
that sounds like a linguistic class, not like a
Yeah,
history class.
yeah.
So yeah, I guess I suppose it depends on what the department actually in fact studies and
Mm,
how they go about studying it. Are they focusing on the English part of those influences, as in they don't care about Norse interactions in Novgorod,
mm,
for instance, or the Norse colony in Greenland, right? Or is their focus on how the Norse influenced, impacted, inhabited England? In which case, that would still, in my mind, fall under early English history. English history, though, not just early English studies. That sounds too much like a language class, I
Actually,
guess, to me.
I really like the answer over on Facebook. So over on Facebook, they were saying that you should really call it maybe early British studies, and I seen that
Mm,
one. I was like, I
mm,
think that's much
yeah,
better, to be honest
that
with
was
you.
that was that was yeah. I was going to say in my brain. I was thinking, well, what about Britain? Because
Yeah.
that's and that's a Roman term, right? Like Britannia, Britannia. That encompasses all of that,
Mm,
everything there, and then that encompasses you know, going all the way up into the islands, in the north of Scotland and the islands between Ireland and England and Scotland and Wales, and it encompasses all of that. Yeah, so
mm.
I could totally go for that. Honestly, just from a purely linguistic perspective, the current name is terrible and it needs to
Yeah.
change. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But how do I pronounce it? What was it? Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic Department.
Ugh, I hate that. I hates it. I hates it so much.
What's our one? I think our one's just called the Celtic Department, and that came down. Believe it or not, guess who gave it that name? It
uh,
is the writer from Lord of the Rings.
oh, Tolkien.
Yeah, Tolkien
He
gave it
he
our
he
name.
he gave it that terrible name.
What? Don't you like Celtic Departments? I like Celtic
Oh, just
Departments.
just Celt just
It's
Celtic
just got
department.
in
Oh,
UC,
okay.
so UCC Celtic Department in
Oh, okay.
Ireland, Cork,
That's
down in the
fine.
very, very tippity top, tippity bottom of Ireland. It was actually founded by Tolkien. Tolkien came to Cork and founded it. A lot of people don't know that he actually was a huge Celtic linguistic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he literally invented his own languages derived from Celtic languages and Welsh, by the way,
Mm,
also. Yeah, he was. Yeah, Tolkien was one of these polymaths. Honestly, he was a bit of a genius. A lot of a
mm,
genius, probably. Yeah, a lot of people don't, and a lot of people haven't read his essays. Like he's written, he was not just an author of epic fantasy. He was
mm,
he was a he was a literary scholar, and so he actually wrote a bunch of interesting critical essays on Beowulf and
mm.
other early English works. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff there.
Oh, I love him. He's brilliant. No, actually, I got that wrong. It's actually Celtic Civilization Department, is what it's called. Celtic Civilization. But I suppose that would be better because Celtic is not a people; it is a civil. What was it? A culture. So Celtic Civilization Department.
Well, except that Ireland isn't just Celtic civilization.
Yeah, they're going to have to do something later on with the North study side of things because
Yeah,
all of
like,
our city settlements later on are all Scandinavian.
and
But we'll see.
there were the peoples who were there before the Celts got there. So
Celts can.
it's
The problem with that one is that first off, in 300 BC, we can't find a link. Both archaeological, what was it, the archaeological finds and DNA finds can't link us back to France in 300 BC.
right.
And then because what was it, our earliest one is 2800, and some of that, believe it or not, is linked as far as Turkey and stuff.
Yes.
And it's mostly the DNA of the Beaker people. It's not, quote unquote, Celtic. No, this is where the arguments all kicked off, and it kicked off again this week as well, which is the fact that, what was it called? The people who specialize in the study of DNA keep calling it, and that, by the way, these people are not qualified historians, but they keep calling it Celtic DNA.
Sorry, my screen is just misbehaving all kinds of ways. Love you, camera. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. A question here. How has Celtic culture trickled down to America? Any regional examples? Oh, to America? Well, what do you mean by Celtic culture? um, that's a that's a that's a tricky question. I mean, I would honestly say that what I understand to be Celtic culture, which is much more ancient than what your average American would say if they said what is Celtic culture. Yeah. So what do you mean by Celtic culture, right? Are you talking about Irish culture from the 19th century? Are you talking about, Ireland in the first millennium? Are you talking about Ireland in the 3rd century BC? Which of those Celts are we talking about? I would say that not much of ancient Celtic culture has trickled down to the U.S. I can't think of any examples, honestly. We don't bury our chieftains in giant mounds with their war wagons and all of their treasures.
I think you're talking about because we have an entire what was it, culture that kicked off in the 19th century with the Scots as well, called the Celtic
Oh
Revival.
God,
So you could be talking about the Celtic Revival.
right?
The only thing about the Celtic Revival, Rachel's favorite kilts and everything, is that, well, first off, it has no connections to medieval Celtic
Yep,
culture. For example, like Rachel can actually talk about this for a while because it's everyone's favorite
it is.
topic, and Rachel actually has done a lot of research on it. Rachel, what's the difference between a kilt in the medieval period and a kilt during the 19th century?
Yeah. So a kilt in the medieval period didn't exist. That's that's step number one. Kilt in the medieval period is a verb, not a noun. It doesn't be it. Yeah, I
What?
know. It doesn't become a noun until the 18th century. Um,
No
yeah, I
way.
know. So no, I
Elaborate.
know. No one is wearing this. So first off, what do you think of as a kilt, right? When a kilt.
A kilt.
Before you met me, what did you think of as a kilt?
Well, you see, I was already used to the lads from the reenactment screaming, great kilt," with the old massive cloak over their
Right,
shoulders and
right,
stuff, right? So
right.
I was kind of used to that linguistic term and
Yeah.
stuff. However, I was unaware of what is
Yep.
kilting. I didn't know what kilting was.
Yeah. So the word kilt actually comes from Norse, and then it comes into
Mm.
English in the Middle English language. And
Oh.
to kilt something literally means to blouse it up through a belt, to tuck it up,
Mm.
right? So it's actually in the 16th century in Scotland, the word kilt is a verb, and it applies almost invariably to women. If you do a search through Scots texts and English texts in Scotland in the 16th century, the word kilt is almost always referred to women, and they're kilting their skirts up through their belts so that they don't get muddy
Mm.
when they're out and about, right? And And
Mm.
so the reason, here's why what we come to call the kilt is called that. Because in the 16th century, what is happening to the weather in Europe in the 16th century, Philip? What's the big change?
Oh, cold. Maybe it's
Get,
getting a little bit cold with a little bit of
getting
a mini ice age of some
Yes,
sort.
yes, it is. It's getting so cold that Britain stops being able to grow grapes. They can't. They stop.
Jeez.
They in the Middle Ages. There's a period where Britain is actually able to grow its own wine, to make its own
Mm.
wine from its own grapes. That stops in the 16th century. So it's getting so cold that people are looking for ways to stay warm. And one of the ways the Scots up there in their particularly not mild climate figure out to stay warm is to take this giant rectangle of fabric. Basically, it's just a length of fabric, right? That's what it is. It's a length of fabric, wool, and they wrap it around themselves like a big personal tent. Like they
Mm.
put a tent over their wear their normal clothes, which is a shirt and a doublet and hosen, and or for the men and for the women, it's a smock like this white thing I'm wearing, and some kind of kirtle, and then another layer over top of that. And so over top of all of that, they take
Mm.
this length of fabric and they wrap it around themselves. But here's
Mm.
the thing about wrapping yourself in a rectangle of fabric, it's not very practical. You have to, you can't use your arms. You can't really move very well. So someone really quickly gets the bright idea that, oh, if we wrap this rectangle of fabric around ourselves and we belt it, then it will stay on our bodies.
Mm.
And and the thing is that the weight of the fabric, if you just belt it, the weight of the fabric will actually pull itself through the belt and it will just fall off your body. Basically, it
Mm.
will pull down. So if you pull it, truss it up through your belt like this, creating this blouse layer, this kilting, it will stay. It won't pull down through your belt. That is how we go from big rectangle of fabric bloused over a belt, arranged in a specific way, especially for the men who want to be out and about and doing things with their arms. Particularly, they want to be able to use their swords in an
Mm.
emergency. Um, that's how we go from rectangle of fabric to rectangle of fabric belted and arranged in a specific way. And then sometime in the 17th century, someone realizes, well, I guess we can kind of arrange it so that it's got these neat folds in it. And then by the 18th century, that turns into what we now call a kilt. And that's the first time we see that word appear as a noun, is in the 18th century. So
Mm. Mm.
it's not in the 16th century. It doesn't even exist in the Middle Ages. As far as we can tell, the Scots are wearing tunics like everyone else and kirtles if you're a
Mm.
woman. And in the 16th century, it basically becomes a kind of cloak that is just secured on the body in a specific way so that they can actually still go about their business. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have any ties to any specific patterns. There's no evidence of a clan tartan. There's no plaid that matches with any particular group of people. And the word plaid doesn't even mean
Yeah.
a pattern in the 16th century. The word plaid just means, it's Gaelic for blanket.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because we were slightly covering this before because the closest thing we could find to kind of a clan color or a clan whatever was the Chris belt. That was the closest one we could find, and it's not even unique to Scotland and Ireland because the Norwegians also needed a belt to identify people who were lost at sea. So how this all came about was that during, and Rachel probably point out finds from even earlier than the early medieval period, but during the early medieval period, fishermen were going out fishing and they were getting lost at sea. And then they would, eventually wash up on shore. But the thing is, if you don't have any form of identity on these people,
Yeah.
then how are you supposed to return them to the right family or clan?
Right.
So, what a lot of clans were doing, and just families in general from Iceland, Norway, Scotland, Ireland, is that they would put a belt around them. So when they did get lost at sea fishing or committing piracy, going a Viking, um,
Working. They were working, Philip.
working, working, is that, what was it called? And there's more people actually in the comment section agreeing. Susan definitely agrees as well, is that she likes the what early British medieval studies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's much better. It's more encompassing,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Regardless, what was it called? What there should be is a belt around the person, so if you get lost at sea, we can find you again. Now, this is where it gets interesting as well. I don't know if this happened during the early medieval period. Maybe Rachel can build up on
Mm.
this one. But regardless, when we get into the High Middle Ages, the Gallo glass, who were originally the Gaul Gael during the early medieval period, they're now using these in battles as well to try to distinguish the difference between my clan and your clan when we're chopping each other up. The only problem we're facing, and I think it was Rachel that brought that up as well, is that during battle these things get dirty, these things fade, they get
Yeah.
bloody. So Rachel feels maybe the Chris isn't the greatest, clan, especially when it's so tiny as well. And even your man, what was it, Connor from the Celtic Templar,
Right.
even he pointed that out as well, that there was, even doing experimental archaeology, there was huge problems of these things getting very filthy and
Yeah.
also, like, they're not, belts are not the greatest,
No, no,
but on
it's
saying
one
that,
thing to be a body tag, like literally to be a toe tag
mm,
for a corpse, right? Because
yeah,
you have time to look at the corpse and look at the belt. But in a battle, it's dirty, it's dusty, and God knows by the later Middle Ages, you've got black powder, right? You've got smoke on the
yeah,
field. You're not gonna. It's
yeah.
gonna be the completely most useless form of identification, really.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm not saying they didn't wear Chris into battle, but they must have, also relied on surcoats and
Yeah.
banners and loads of other ways to say, okay, I am clan so and so, and that's clan whoever.
Right.
But when it comes down to, as we were saying, the tartans and all that kind of stuff, we just can't find any
Mm-mm.
evidence of them having specific tartans for their
Yep.
clans, especially going into battle. But we just haven't found the, and especially like there is Scottish academics who spend loads of money and have Patreons giving them loads of money to research clan patterns. So they're especially in Scotland literally trying to pull their teeth out
Yeah.
to try and find evidence. Because you can find it for the Chris belt, we just can't find it for the
Yeah,
tartans
and it
as of
just
right now.
and honestly, again, on a practical level, a tartan is not going to be a great way to ID people because
Yeah,
that's you want to talk about your eyes blurring the pattern, especially in the heat of battle. No, you need bright primary colors, really easy to identify symbols. A tartan's purpose, that pattern, a lot, if you actually look at the fabrics that have survived from the Middle Ages that have what we call a tartan pattern, a plaid pattern. Neither of words are medieval or even Renaissance in use, by the way. They mean
mm,
something completely different. But I'm talking about, the striped patterns and the checked patterns. If they're not going to be visually identifiable in any kind of practical way. So you're still going to kill your friends, is what I'm saying.
yeah.
You're going to end up killing your friends.
But
Yeah,
the problem is as well is that because what I'm covering 13th century right now over my Patreon as well, and the thing is, and you've pointed 1,000 times as well. The problem is as well is that Scotland and Ireland are not insular to the world. They're following fashions from the wider world. So what happens then is that when you're in the 13th century and you're going into the Scottish War of Independence, is that they're following the fashion of the wider world going into the Scottish War of Independence.
right.
So in reality, in the movie Braveheart, Willie Wallace is wearing, 19th century tartan and kilts,
And
but in
and
reality,
and
he's
two
following the
and two
fashion.
thousand year old blue paint.
Just get a bit of blue paint there, be grand. Which he was putting on, by the way. He was in a field in the middle of nowhere.
Oh,
What was it? Middle. What was it? Oh my God! It's up where Trim is. Kildare, right? So he's in the middle, bogland, middle of nowhere, and he comes up with the idea of shoving blue paint on because somebody was like, "Yeah, I think Celtic people have blue
oh my
paint on
God.
there." No, no research or anything done. The lad's just, and then a few minutes later, then he's on top of a ladder or a microphone. So fun times.
God. Okay. So there was a comment here, Emma, and I agree with this. My theory is that local weavers would follow certain patterns with their weaving. So you may recognize other people who live local to you through the weaver's pattern. Yeah. So that is definitely a theory about, how it could have happened, except that there seems to be no evidence of identifying. Like, here's the thing. I totally agree that there may have been certain patterns that were local to certain areas based on for homespun fabric, especially because certain dye stuff, natural dye stuff, certain plants might be more prevalent in certain regions, very local regions, than in other regions. So it makes sense that in this part of Scotland, for instance, it's more common for home weavers to weave fabric that is brown and yellow because the dye stuffs that are available lead to brown and yellow. Whereas the people in this other corner of Scotland are more likely to weave red and green because the fabrics, the dye stuffs
Mm.
that they have easily and cheaply available and that work best for their area are red and green. It's just that, and I agree with that 100%. I don't know, though, that that had anything to do with the assignment of the patterns, because Philip, you and I know when the clans got their patterns assigned to them, right? It's
Yeah,
it's all part of the
it's up around the
nationalist,
19th
yeah,
century.
exactly, early 19th century. It's
Yeah.
all part of that nationalist movement, and it was very artificial, is from what I can tell.
Mm.
It wasn't based on any, oh well, this is kind of what we see in this area. I haven't gotten that impression reading about how it was done. Have you? Have you actually?
No, not
Yeah,
whatsoever. I think these days when people are putting together clan tartans and all that kind of stuff, they are putting more ideas into it. But during the what was it, the 19th century? I don't want to sound bad because people in the 19th century aren't that ignorant, but at the same time, there's a huge, massive lack of what was it, research and stuff done when it comes down to the 19th century because they just didn't have access to it. You know, they didn't have access to the translations that we have now and also the archaeological
right.
finds that we
Yeah,
have now.
nothing.
And there doesn't seem to be. It seems to be that lads were just shoving on. This is my clan tartan. This is your clan tartan to have more of an identity of who they were in the 19th century rather than a reflection of their history back in the 13th century, for
Yeah,
example, because that was another point I wanted to bring up as well is that, plaid, tartan, whatever you want to call it, the fashion changes, as we're going into the 13th century, the fashion of the Scottish and the Irish is more reflection of an Anglo fashion wave that's coming in from France, by the way, into England, and then from there, from Bristol into Dublin in Ireland, and also from what was it, London up to Edinburgh.
yeah,
So people of that period were taking on more of the fashion waves that were coming from France rather than a Celtic fashion.
yeah, yeah. No, it's absolutely true. So yeah, I just the whole thing about using what we call a plaid
Mm.
to identify specific people. I haven't seen the evidence for it in the Middle Ages, but I've said this yesterday and I'll say it again. And I still have to follow up on it. A year ago, you and I did a live stream about medieval Scottish fashion. And it was
Mm.
almost a year ago to the day because it was a memory on Facebook for me. um, and I
Nice.
was in Thailand then too. And
Oh,
but
nice.
back then, for that live stream, I discovered that there's this massive government-funded research project um, into medieval Scottish fashion, and I
Mm.
reached out to the doctor who is the head of that project at the time, and she said, I was asking if she could share any information. What she said is, we're about to publish the paper. So it's been a year.
Oh.
It's been a year. So I'm hoping that about to publish is about a year or less, and that the paper has been published.
Yeah.
Because she told
Hopefully.
this doctor told me, I forget what her name is, but she told me that the research was really pretty far reaching and exploring a
Mm.
lot of sources that hadn't been explored before. So I'm hoping that means documentary evidence. I'm hoping that means expense accounts and chronicles and maybe literature. I'm hoping that means new archaeology, because that would be really fantastic. So I'm really hoping that this paper, once it's published, it will turn the light on to the reality of medieval Scottish fashion more than what I have been able to discover through the limited resources that are currently available. So here's
Mm.
hoping.
Emma Emma brings up a really good point, right? And this is definitely something you can both agree and disagree with, Rachel, because you've done a good bit of research onto the O'Neills, who are connected to the Scottish Highlands. And what Emma's saying over on
Right.
Facebook, she says in the lower lands, yes. And what she's agreeing to, by the way, is that fashion wave that comes in the 13th century, and also other fashion waves that come in, go from London then up to Edinburgh, right? So Emma, 100% agree with. I also 100% agree with that as well. The problem is the Highlands, and this is something that is very interesting as well. Is that this is what Emma says? I have a different interpretation, so I'm not going to disagree with what
Mm,
Emma says, but I do have a different interpretation of this. She says, but the Highlands were very insular, outside of nobility, and kept quiet, steady fashion wise, as in they kind of just kept to themselves up in the Highlands and were very insular. Um, this is something that I kind of agree with, but at the same time, I kind of disagree with. The thing about the Highlands, from my interpretation of the literature and archaeological finds, is that I find where the Lowlands and Edinburgh is very much linked to the Anglo and French
hmm
world later on.
hmm
I do find that the Highlands is more connected to the territories of the O'Neills. There's lots of interaction with the O'Neills, but I also find that they're very interactive. And looking at the finds that you actually highlighted, Rachel, is that they're also still interacting. Although we believe that the Viking Age has come to an end, there
Right, right,
still seems to be a form of interaction going on with Iceland and Norway.
right.
And also on top of that as well, because of their connections with the O'Neills, they seem to be very much connected with Ireland throughout the entirety of the medieval world. So I wouldn't say me, in my interpretation, I do believe there's a certain level of an insular, but I don't think it's that insular, do you
Yeah,
know?
so I guess it depends on
Rachel, what's your
it
interpretation?
depends on what we mean by the high, like what counts as the Highlands? Where do the Highlands start?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
always the tricky question, right? What count? So I was when I was in Scotland, when I went to Scotland for the second time, I was shocked
Mm.
at where some of my Scottish friends told me, "Well, now you're in the Highlands." I'm like, "But we're not that far from Edinburgh." So it depends on what you mean by the Highlands, right? So I do absolutely. So here's the thing. I agree that fashion is always more conservative at lower levels of society.
Mm.
100%. I would never ever posit that a peasant who actually works in the fields is going to be able to adopt the latest and greatest in court fashion. I would never ever posit that. I would never say that. That doesn't, and indeed, for certain, we know that fashion changes more slowly on the lower levels of society. For one, they can't afford to replace their garments with the latest and greatest in fashion as often.
Mm.
Two, they can't necessarily afford the kind of tailoring that fashion starts assuming as the Middle Ages wear on and fashions start getting more complicated.
Mm.
So they're not necessarily going to have a Charles de Bois style coat, COTE, with its 17-piece arm's eye and its 7-piece body, right? They're going to have a looser, less fitted, more simply constructed garment, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
that doesn't necessarily mean that it's so drastically different from what other people in their social status are wearing in other parts of, say, Britain, even. Um, so yeah, no, I agree that it's more insular, but I don't think that means it's completely isolated.
Yeah.
And again, what do you mean by the Highlands? So, for example, there's archaeology. I'm not certain in the official definition. Do Perth and Galloway count as the Highlands or the Lowlands or the
Yeah.
Midlands?
Yeah. Somebody else also asks in the comment section, does Inverness count? Well, I would consider Inverness very, very Gaelic, to be quite honest with
I
you.
would, I
Especially,
would, I would. Inverness is like quintessential
yeah.
Gaelic,
And
right?
you bring up a huge, massive problem, and this is why I want to bring what's Hamish. Hamish is an absolute genius for this kind of stuff. When I'm talking to him, he goes so fast I get lost. I thought I knew Scottish culture. I don't, especially compared to Hamish. Hamish is an absolute genius when it comes down to studying the archaeological finds of the early medieval period in Scotland, right?
Right.
And he brings up a very good point. The problem is that not only are you dealing with a kind of layer, a pre-layer of Pictish identity, which we can't trying to decode what is the Pictish identity. And
Mhm.
somebody even asked in the comment section there, are the Picts Celts? We don't know. We don't know. These people, they woke. This is the weirdest thing ever, and it freaks people out. In around 820 to 850, the Scottish woke up one day. They went to bed as Picts. They went and they woke up as Gaelic, and no one understands what the hell happened. This is the way historians are looking at this, and they don't understand what the hell is going on here. So already there's a layer that's insanely mysterious in Scotland to even start with, right? Then we have the next layer, right, which is what we try to highlight as Gaelic, right? Which is the Highlands, right? So anytime you turn around to a default person and say, okay, so this is the Highlands and this is the Lowlands, people try to highlight that the Highlands is everything that's Gaelic, but it's not. It blurs in. Why
Right.
does it blur in? Because you have various marriage
Yeah.
alliances, you have people who are adopted into each other's families, and various other reasons. Even people just getting up one day and just moving over to the other side. Oh, now I'm in the Highlands. Does this make the Highlands the Lowlands and the Lowlands Highlands? Do you know?
Yeah. It's
Insanely
and
blurry.
and you know, I do know that throughout the Middle Ages there are Scottish lords who are from the Highlands who go and wage war. They go on campaign in the continent, right?
Yeah.
Because
Mm,
that's where the money is. It's campaigning on the continent, right? That's where you can.
it is.
So it's yeah. What it's a question. I think Emma makes a very valid point. But I think it's less about geography and perhaps more about your station in life, right?
Mm,
Because
yeah.
the lords, the aristocrats, the warriors who are actually out and about campaigning in a variety of places, you know, they're being exposed to all kinds of other cultural phenomena, including fashion and armor, and
Mm,
they're bringing goods back with them, right?
yeah.
And in some cases, you know, they take their ladies with them, right?
Yes, they do.
Women go on campaign sometimes with their knights. So,
Mm,
and they're marrying, like you said, the marriages. They're not just marrying other Highland women, right? Some of them are marrying English women. Some of them are marrying Irish
yes.
women. Some of them are marrying
Mm,
French and Danish women and Norwegian women, right? We've got all of
mm,
these connections. So I think yes, I will never say that the Highlands were in the mainstream of Europe because that would be ignorant beyond belief because
mm.
the geography of the Highlands does absolutely create a natural insularity. But I don't think they were so isolated that they were still wearing the same thing that they would have been in 1300 as they would have been in 1000 or 1000, for instance. Yeah.
Another a very good example there, Galloway, the one that you highlighted there as well, and also you have what was it, the Isles just between Ireland and Scotland, and it's the same with Iona as well. All those areas are occupied by the MacLeods and the MacDonalds. The MacLeods and the MacDonalds. Everybody knows McDonald's. I'm waiting for the McDonald's joke to kick in there. It always kicks in there. But regardless, the McDonalds and the MacLeods, they're very, as you point out there, they're allegedly meant to be Gaelic as you come. They're meant to be, when you think of Scottish kilt up, what was it called? War bands, and
Right.
later on Gaelic mercenary companies. That's how they make their
Right.
money. But they made a lot of money. So as you point out there, they're heavily involved with
Right.
France. Are they not wearing French clothing? You know, and also when they're campaigning in Ireland, are they wearing Gaelic clothing? Very complicated society, which is the society of the MacLeods and the
Right.
MacDonalds, because they're constantly moving here, there, and everywhere. And that's because they live on the Isles. They don't live up, when you imagine Highlands and you're thinking about these big mountains that, you know, and you have these Celtic people that come down to raid. In fact, their foundation is actually meant to be legendary. Norse, they're meant to be from Norway into those areas, married local Gaelic and Pictish people, and settled down.
Right.
You know, so even from the get go, the MacLeods and the at least we got Highlander ones anyway in there. Aiden, what was it
McLeod.
called?
Adam.
Oh,
Go
aye.
Adam. I mean, so, you know, the other thing about medieval society in Scotland, as far as I understand it, is that there would be annual fairs that would
Mm,
be held in certain places, and that the people and there would be peddlers who would actually they would go to those fairs, they would purchase a bunch of wares. The fairs were generally an international affair, and then they would
mm,
actually go peddling through the Highlands, selling these wares that in many cases represented imports. So
mm,
there were methods of exposure, but I definitely agree with Emma on this. Is that it would have been a delayed delayed exposure, right? The
Yeah.
latest hairnet in Paris is not going to immediately make its way to Inverness, I guess is my point necessarily. But we
Mm.
do know, like those, you've heard me say it before, I'll say it again. They've been increasingly doing uh, excavations across Scotland. And the most recent ones, not most recent ones, the ones I've read most recently about are the excavations in Perth and Galloway, and there was a third city. And
Mm.
what was shocking about these excavations in that the layer from the 14th century showed that those Scottish cities were very internationally connected in the side of commodities, of consumer goods.
Yeah.
So there were hairnets there made of silk with little embroidered medallions on them that had been imported from Germany, what's now Germany. So only Central Europe, right? There were fabrics there that came. There was linen. I think they found some linen, little bits of linen left that were identified as coming from France, right? So
Mm.
there's very clear signs of this very thriving international trade, at least in these towns in Scotland. And they're, like I said, with the peddlers and the other ways of bringing goods up into those more remote places, I think eventually a lot of those items did make their way there. The change would have been more slow. They would not have been at the bleeding edge of fashion. I agree with that. Sure.
Mm. Yeah, but you were looking at what was that source again? And I still find it very interesting today from the 14th century about the visitors from Iberian
Oh,
Peninsula that went to
Saint
modern day
Saint Saint
Spain,
Saint
got into
Patrick's
O'Neill.
Purgatory, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The Count Viscount Perellos, Ramon de Perellos, right? So he's
mm,
this Catalan viscount, and he goes on pilgrimage to Saint Patrick's Purgatory. Which, have
yeah.
you ever been to St. Patrick's Purgatory? It's a pilgrimage destination in
I
Ireland.
meant to. I
Yeah.
meant to. I meant to. Yuki wanted to go up there, and at the time, because we were doing reenactments and stuff, and I wanted to get more involved with what we were doing on the ground at the time, and I was like, "We can go back later, Yuki." And Yuki was just like, depressingly, was like, "But I want to go now." But we didn't go because I wanted to do all the reenactment stuff at the time.
uh,
But yeah, maybe
uh,
there's a huge part of me now that thinks Yuki's right. But oh well.
oh well, lesson
So I
learned.
didn't go. Yeah, yeah.
Well, so this Catalan viscount at the end of the 14th century goes on pilgrimage to St. Patrick's Purgatory, which honestly fine, and he writes a travel vlog. He writes a
Mm.
detailed travel vlog about his entire journey, and he has lots of interesting things to say about the Irish. Um,
Cool.
and and I mean, none of them bad, just interesting, right? He's
Oh.
actually he okay. He does say that the people in the court of King O'Neill in Tyrone, it's his words, not mine. He says King O'Neill, because that is his Catalan understanding of hierarchy and nobility in Ireland in the end of the 14th century. He said he's welcomed there. He's shown great hospitality, um, and he talks about how they're all naked. but then
Mm.
but then he goes on to talk about all the clothes they're wearing. So it's very interesting that his idea of naked is not a modern idea of naked at all. For him, naked means insufficiently clothed, but still some
Oh.
clothes on their body, right? Because he talks
Mm.
about, well, they're wearing, the queen and her ladies are wearing nothing but a smock, this white layer basically, and a cloak. You're like, okay, but that's not naked. That's two layers, buddy. that's,
I.
that's two layers, buddy. And he talks about them. Yeah, he talks about it. He says a lot of things about them, but it is very interesting how much more connected Ireland, and that part of Ireland, no less, because that's not in the
Mm.
south. The St. Patrick's Purgatory is up in the north, isn't it? Right,
Yeah, it's the very
right.
north because how Ireland is cut in, because this was 14th century, was it? Was the 14th or 15th century he was talking
End of the
about? I think it
14th.
was
It's
14th
like the
century, into
1390s,
the 14th.
1390s. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ireland at this point is cut into two areas, and Dr. Owen O'Neill always highlights that as well. Is since the coming of the Vikings, Ireland gets cut into two parts. So the southeast of the island is where, and it's the same thing today, guys. It's cut into two parts, and the southeast is the most developed. The reason why it's so developed is because that's where all the city ports are. So if you have a city port, you're going to be connected to the wider
Right.
world. So during the early medieval period, this was the Hiberno-Scandinavian areas of Ireland, which were, the Irish Viking areas, very mixed with both the Scandinavian people and the Irish people. In the High Middle Ages and the late medieval period, it is the Anglo-Irish areas. Well, kind of the old Frenchish, well, definitely kind of old French, kind of Irish area
Right.
during the High Middle Ages. And then during the late medieval period, it's the Anglo-Irish areas then. So those areas of the southeast, which is Dublin, Cork, Limerick, and Waterford, and Galway as well. I always forget about Galway. Galway
Poor
is
Galway.
Gaelic. It was made
Poor
by the Danes.
Galway.
Yeah, yeah. And that one was actually made by the locals. The locals actually built that city themselves. And those city areas then become the most developed areas in Ireland. The problem is then, because you don't have those same ports built in Ireland, like Belfast is not made until way later on in the early modern period. So Belfast is not constructed yet. So there's no major ports in the northwest of the island where you have the likes of the O'Connors.
Right.
Well, the O'Connors are somewhat connected to Galway, but the O'Neills have nothing at this point. They have no major ports. So they kind of have the kind of hand, and you can see with the clothing and stuff, they kind of have the hand me downs, just like the Highlands have of the hand me downs from everyone else.
Right. Right. So, oh goodness, we somehow got on bathhouses. I missed a bathhouse comment. How did we miss a bathhouse comment? Uh, uh,
Especially you've done tons of
yeah,
work on
seriously,
bathhouses. You should be there with your whip.
from the Iberian Peninsula, like me. Yes, tea with Tash. So we are talking about a Ramon de Perellos, who's from
Mm,
Catalunya. Yeah, viene de Catalunya, de Catalunya. He's Catalan. And he makes this
mm.
pilgrimage up to St. Patrick's Purgatory, where he comments that the people in the court of Tyrone are naked. And one of the questions was maybe he means they're not wearing enough clothes for the weather. Oh, for certain, he thinks they're not wearing enough clothes for the weather.
Ah,
um,
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
and
especially for himself because he would have felt that
oh
bitter
yes,
coldness going up
yeah,
north. Yeah,
coming
especially to the very
coming
north of
coming
Ireland.
from mild Barcelona, right, and going up
Mm,
to Tyrone, he would have he would have felt the difference.
Jesus.
especially
Yeah, poor man.
especially in the end of the 14th century, which is the Little Ice Age. So he's uh
Yeah, yeah.
he's probably wondering why all these people are not appropriately dressed. And Emma says was uncovered hair. Yeah, so some of the women had definitely had uncovered hair, according to him. And
Mm,
yeah, but his big thing is that they're wearing not, but there's shirts and there's cloaks. That's what he kind of marvels over in particular.
mm.
Which, of course, the cloak in this case is probably is the brat, is
Yeah.
whatever the brat was in the end of the 14th century, which, as you and I have discussed, the shape of the brat changes across the centuries, right? It's different
Yeah,
things
it
to different
does.
people.
But the brat at that point was still transfer, or at least transforming into that big, heavy
Yeah,
one at that point, because Richard II, and this is so funny because the Statutes of Kilkenny has come out in
yeah,
1366, and in the Statutes of Kilkenny, it tells Englishmen not to be wearing brats, and yet Richard II goes off and robs loads of them from Art MacMurrough's clan and the O'Byrnes and the O'Tooles, and he brings them back to England.
yeah,
And it was Henry Bolingbroke actually makes a comment about this when he attacks, what was it, Richard II, and steals it. He finds that most of his cargo was made up of brats and stuff, so he makes a note of that. Which, as a historian in the future, I do wonder because Henry Bolingbroke, his son and stuff, was very active fighting in Ireland and trying to enforce the statutes of Kilkenny. So it's just funny that one law for us and another law for the king.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so the statutes of Kilkenny are actually part of a sweeping set of sumptuary legislation. So it's
Mm,
not just the Irish who are getting, like, the English are
yeah,
also getting regulated
yeah,
and told
yeah.
what they can and cannot wear in that whole. It's part of this massive legislative package, as we would call it today, full of riders, as we would say in the United States. And so everyone,
Mm.
the Irish should feel included, actually, because also their fellow Englishmen are being regulated and told what they can and cannot
Mm.
wear based on their status. So it's not just the
Yeah.
Irish; they're not alone.
What's your recent interpretation of the Statutes of Kilkenny. Do you think it's a case of versus uncivilized, or do you think that it's an ethnic stat, that it's a case of the Irish are ethnically being singled out? What's your interpretation of the Statutes of Kilkenny?
So having actually read them, it strikes me more as an issue of identity.
Okay.
And we in the Pale, right?
Mm.
We in the Pale need to be able to know who are our friends and who are our foes. And we need to be able to identify that visually, quickly, and easily.
Mm.
And you've got all these outside of the Pale and around the Pale, you've got all these Gaelic Irish raiders coming in all the time and raiding.
Mm.
According to the statutes, they actually say this is the problem. We cannot, and they don't use the word civilized or uncivilized. The term wild is nowhere in there. It's
Okay.
all about being able to identify the enemy.
Oh yes, the
It's
Irish
about the
enemy.
it's about the enemy, and the enemy is not the Irish people living within the Pale. The
Mm.
enemy are the what they call the Irish, right? Because
Mm.
they don't use the word Gael in the Statutes of Kilkenny,
Okay.
right? It's about these Irish, the Irish raiders. They actually
Mm.
talk about that. They make mention of them, that we have these Irish raiders and these Irish highwaymen, basically, who
Mm.
are they're coming in, they're looting, they're stealing, they're causing chaos, and
Mm.
we cannot defend ourselves. And what ends up happening is the patrols that are being sent out to find them and root them out end up killing Englishmen
Mm.
because the Englishmen look like the Irish. And so the statutes of Kilkenny are more about distinguishing who is an enemy and who isn't visually.
Mm.
That's what
Yeah.
it's not really about ethnic superiority. I did not walk away with a sense of it's about ethnic superiority when
Yeah. Yeah.
at least in the statutes that I read. It was all very practical. We need to know who it is. We need to know who it is we should kill and who it is we shouldn't kill.
Yeah.
So, and one of the main ways to visually distinguish between the Gaelic Irish and the English is facial hair,
Okay.
right? So they actually tell the Englishmen, you must shave every 2 weeks at least. You cannot
Ah.
you cannot have facial hair that is more growth than that, because
Mm.
if you start getting a beautiful lush curly beard, then we're
Mm.
going to think you're Irish,
Mm.
right? So there's I mean, it's not just clothing, it's facial hair, it's appearance, it's grooming that is regulated. And it's all about being able to easily, quickly, visually determine the difference, because apparently there'd been a lot of cases of Englishmen being killed as part of these mistaken identity, basically.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's this it's a little more gruesome than just ethnic prejudice. It's we need to know who to kill.
Yeah. Yeah, the 14th century is a very, 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 very funny one because sometimes we look at what's happening in the 16th century. So in the 16th century, it is solidly Cromwell wants to go in there and kill as many
Right.
non-Protestant, Catholic,
Yeah, yeah,
Irish,
yeah.
uncivilized. Cromwell just wants to wipe them off the map. And I know there's a lot of later historians and stuff that try to make out, hey, look, Cromwell, he was only after one certain group, and that's because they were the bad guys or they did certain times. I'm sorry. There were times when people were surrendering, and Cromwell was like, no, 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 kill them all. God will sort
Yeah.
them out.
Yeah, exactly. Kill them all, let God sort them out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what was it? Dundalk is one of the greatest examples ever. In Dundalk, multiple times, and it was an English general in charge of Irish people inside of the settlement. So what was it? Was it an English Protestant man inside of the settlement who had Catholic Irish inside? Asked for the surrender from Cromwell, and Cromwell denied any form of surrender whatsoever. And he went in there and he just killed everyone. Every royalists, Republicans,
Right.
everybody was wiped out.
Yeah.
This is why the O'Neills were originally, because the enemies of the O'Neills in the 16th century were the Protestant royalists. That was the enemies of the O'Neills. They actually favored Cromwell. The moment Cromwell goes in and has this kill 'em all attitude in Ireland, that's where the O'Neills 100% go anti Republican Cromwell. Cromwell
Right.
now is an evil, evil dictator. And this is this is what's wild, but it makes sense when you think about it. Cromwell was fighting the royalist English inside of England. There was a
Right.
lot of Gaelic Republicans that in the 16th century, in the early modern period, that favored Cromwell and actually wanted Cromwell to succeed, right? But then when Cromwell does rock up in Ireland, he has a kill 'em all attitude. And
Right.
so he makes very, very quickly after Dundalk makes enemies all over Ireland, right? But the problem is from the 16th century is we then think and can apply that into the 14th century, where it's actually way more complicated when you're dealing with barons and a central, well, Richard trying to make somewhat of a centralized community,
Right.
although he can't even do it inside of England because of Henry Bolingbroke, who rocks up then and usurps him. But
Yeah.
regardless, it's
He
quite
made some
complicated
mistakes.
inside of England and Ireland during the 14th century.
Yeah,
And
it's a mess. And
yeah,
it's yeah, like Takeda says, it's about identifying us versus them. And the statutes of Kilkenny even advise some of the Irish within the Pale to also, you might want to do this too, so that we don't mistake you for one of the enemies,
mm,
right? So it's yeah, I just don't that the real start of that, as far as I can tell, the real start of the ethnic discrimination against the Irish, from a we are superior perspective, that's more of a, Reformation era
yeah,
thing that has as much to do with the Irish being Papist Catholic
mm,
as it
yeah.
does with them being Irish,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I definitely agree with you there. It's at that point then you do have the likes of the Tudors and then later on Cromwell and his cronies and all that stuff. That's when they dig up the past and rewrite it. But don't get me wrong, I think Gerald of Wales is very anti-Irish. What
Yeah,
he writes in his
he's
book is
he's he's
horrible.
he's funny, right? Gerald of
What
Wills is a
funny? He's
he's a funny
horrible.
he's a funny one. I mean, he's a funny one though. I mean, as a
Yeah,
person, like
yeah,
he's odd. It's like,
yeah,
dude, you are Welsh.
yeah.
Why are you say why are
Yes,
you is
exactly.
it's almost like it's a slander campaign that's almost intended to say, well, look, the Irish, man, they're trash, but we
Yeah.
Welsh, we're awesome, so you English should love us because we're awesome, but the
Mm.
Irish are trash, right? It's almost like that syndrome whereby we try to make friends with the bully so
Yeah.
that so that the bully leaves us alone and
Mm.
bothers someone else. Yeah, Gerald of Wales, he says the whole idea that the king and his men have to eat a raw mare as
Yeah.
part of the coronation investiture ceremony, is
Mm.
that based in any actual reality, or is that just pure slander?
It's wild. My what was it? My professor in University College of Cork, Dermot Scully, he's now made a full career out of studying Gerald of Wales because it's so unique. I think everybody should read Gerald of Wales's work, The Topography of Ireland, it's called, and you can literally buy the
Fascinating.
handbook everywhere. Yeah, his imagination goes wild in it as well
Yeah,
because
it does.
what's crazy is that you can, if you look at Irish myths and sagas, any of those books, you can see the source of it. But it's like somebody told him one of these stories. You can tell he's never actually left Dublin. In my opinion, I think he went to the city areas of Cork, of Dublin, of Limerick, but I don't think he ever went out into the countryside that he's
Yeah,
talking about. I think all these
I don't.
stories come from stories from local pubs that he got a hold of and just transformed into his book.
I mean, the reality is, and I've said this a lot recently, and I'll say it again:
Mm.
clickbait is not new, right?
Yeah.
Your composition, your work, your literature, the thing you write, your chronicle is only going to get read if it's sensational
Mm.
and interesting. And I don't mean sensational as a judgment of quality. I mean sensational as in it causes a sensation, and
Yeah.
it's crazy and it's over the top and it's gruesome and it's completely unexpected.
Mm.
Medieval writers knew that. Marco Polo knew that. Look at some of the crap he writes. He talks about people. He talks about people whose faces are in their chests, right,
Mm.
and who don't have heads. And that's not true.
I don't
So
know.
yeah, you don't know, me
Once the
neither.
Genghis Khan wiped out a few people, all right, like.
Yeah, so it's that's yeah. Gerald of Wales is a fun ride. I'll put it
Mm.
that way. It's a fun ride, especially if you view it as more what I call fantasy geography. Right? It's like
Mm.
fantasy geographic. Like if National Geographic were written by fantasy authors, that would be Gerald of Wales.
Oh, definitely. Thanks so much there, Ryan, for the old thumbs up and subscribe. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that one. Everyone should thumbs up and subscribe, especially on my channel. And also, I agree with Emma as well. When the Normans come in, and their allies, the Britons, the Frisians, etc., go in and invade England around 1066, and then push up to the north of England in what was it, 1080.
Right.
The Howling of the North, they were insanely
Yeah.
anti Danish and Anglo-Saxons in Europe, especially
Yeah.
in
It
York.
was
Like
gruesome.
they went in there. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
they committed full. Am I allowed to say it on YouTube? I don't know.
Atrocities. Say
They wiped them
atrocities. Just
atrocities.
atrocities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 They wiped
Yeah.
them out of it. It was horrendous
Agreed.
what they did to them.
Yep.
So this isn't like the destruction that the Normans committed inside of England isn't just in England alone.
Right.
The atrocities that they commit in Ireland still today is used even recently in the Irish Parliament. I don't think this has ever happened. Like I
Wow.
don't think it's ever happened in the American. What's the American version of the Irish Parliament?
Congress, my friend. Congress.
Congress. Right, right, right. Now that I'm up to date. Congress. I don't think Congress has ever turned around as well. 800 years ago. And by the way, the
No.
Irish Parliament, the French wanted to give the Irish money to celebrate the
I
Norman invasion
know.
of
That
Ireland.
was so
Yeah.
ridiculous. Talk about tone deaf.
Well, yeah. But at the same time, I still would have accepted that money regardless. You're giving me money, are you?
but
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 because we're
to
still
celebrate the Norman invasion of Ireland, that's I mean, there's some similarly tasteless situations I could posit, but I don't want my channel to be demonetized. So
free money, but at the same time, I'm the Irish one here. I'm meant to be highlighting the history. 850
right.
years. What was it called? And the problem is as well, Michael Collins. I don't know if he actually said it, but it's in his movie anyway. They're hoisting up the flag, and Collins turns around and says, "What was it?" He talks about 800 years of British occupation. And it's a great, don't get me wrong, it's a great quote. I understand the feelings about it, but it's not actually 800 years of occupation.
Right.
In
Right.
fact, the British weren't even around for 800
Yeah,
years.
exactly.
And on top of that as well, yeah, on top of that as well, by, was it 1399, the English have no control in Ireland.
Yeah.
It was Archmac Covenant. Archmac Covenant was even taking tribute out of Dublin. And when he ends up getting poisoned by the English in New Ross, the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers, they go in independently, semi-independently, because this is what's funny is that they're pocketing, they go into Dublin and they start taking that tribute money and all that money for themselves and start putting it in their own pocket. But then when they're writing this, they're going, oh, this is for the king, by the way. So this becomes our running thing all the way up to around 1534, when the English finally invade into Ireland and put the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers in their place. But before then, they would do stuff in Ireland. Was it Seamus Fitzgerald had taken on the title of Deputy of Ireland, and every single time he would take an action independently to himself in Ireland, he would always write off at the end for the King of England, just to make sure he
Right.
wasn't breaking any laws.
Right. I'm all doing this for you, buddy. All for you.
Yeah, yeah. And what's hilarious is that first off, it was Gerald Fitzgerald invades England to attack Tudor, right? Because the Tudors had usurped, what was it, Richard III, right? And the Fitzgeralds were allied
Yep.
to the King of England. So
Damn
they
the
then, in
Tudors.
retaliation, oh, aye,
I hate,
they
I
invaded.
often,
Go
I
on.
often fantasize about the world without the Tudors, right? Like I really do
So do I.
fantasize about where we would be in the present era, in the present world situation, if if Henry had lost the Battle of Bosworth,
Mm,
right? If the
yeah.
Yorks had actually continued, and Richard had had a prosperous reign and sired heirs, we wouldn't have. I mean, Jesus, the differences in the world today. Very interesting
No, I,
place.
I, I, put, I push up again, and I envision a world where the Irish had won the Battle of Stokefield, because a lot of
Oh
people
yeah,
think that's the last. The Battle of Bosworth is the last battle of the Wars of the Roses.
it is
It's
not.
actually not. The
It is not.
last battle of the Wars of the Roses is actually the Battle of Stokefield, which is fought between the Fitzgeralds and the Tudors, where the Tudors actually won that battle. Our flanks were terrible during that battle. But regardless, we end up losing the Battle of Stokefield, which ends the what was it called? The Wars of the Roses, both in Ireland and over in England as well. Um, so I do try to envision that as well. Just popping back in. Somebody had a very oh yeah, did South Wales get offered money for the Norman invasion? If they did, the British probably pocketed it. The thing is that Wales was already celebrating the those Norman invasions and stuff. So the Battle of Hastings is already done, and those other battles and stuff the reenactors are already doing anyway. It's just the Irish; they don't have any Norman reenactors up and running. And on top of that as well, politically, the problem is that the moment France wanted to give money, Sinn Féin, their opposing political party inside of Ireland, they just went mad. They were like, "We shouldn't have anything to do with this," and blah 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 blah. And I'm listening to this, and I'm like, "But I like reenactment. What are you doing?"
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if it's to actually have a, just to do a proper reenactment with both sides represented,
Mm,
I'm all for it. I mean, yeah, why not? You're
yeah,
right. Why not take the money? Take the money and do the reenactment, right? Um,
yeah.
now, would some of the strings attached to said money be, for instance, we must tout the glory of the Normans and their accomplishments in Ireland? That would be hard for me to swallow. I couldn't. I couldn't do that. Um,
Mm, mm, mm.
maybe not that part of it. But also, even so, I mean, which is it that they want the Irish to do a reenactment of the Battle of Hastings, but in Ireland, or what is it they wanted
Well,
Ireland to do exactly? Like, what would this reenactment have been? I guess
they want a what was it? I think it's to celebrate Rollo. I think it's like the
to
thousand
celebrate
anniversary or
Rolf
something.
the Ganger. Seriously, how?
Well, it's I think it's the like thousand anniversary or something of when Rollo
Right.
had taken over Normandy, had been given that land. So they wanted just one big giant celebration that year to celebrate
I see.
all the accomplishments of the
Got it.
Normans. And so they asked the English. The English were like, yeah, yeah, because there's already a connection between England and what was
Nor
it, France
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah,
Yeah, because they also like the thing is that England gets to celebrate its huge victories in France all the time, such as the Battle of Waterloo, and they get to celebrate what was it, the Battle of Agincourt. So all those
yeah.
battles are already been celebrated in France anyway. But because the Irish are only fresh out of a war against England, which only ended in
Right.
1998, the Irish, when they heard about this, they were like, no, the British cannot come to Ireland. And remember, as I was joking there, the saying is 800 years of British
Yeah, yeah,
occupation.
yeah.
So the Irish don't look at this as the Normans, the Barons attacking Gaelic Barons. They look at this as the English, the British invading
Right.
Ireland, and starting at 800 years. They might as well be flying a big massive
Union
Union
Jack.
Jack. Yeah.
Rule Britannia.
Yes, coming off the boat, like, can you imagine, like, and they're paying us money to celebrate this. What the hell, you know?
Oh my God. Oh the joys. Okay, did we miss any? Oh, good night, T. Sleep well. Thank you. Appreciate your support as always. Just seeing if I missed any. If everyone, if we missed any comments or questions, just pop them back in the chat. I've been trying to monitor it, but you guys talk a lot, which is great. No criticism. Let me see. Richard III, the illegitimate heir, but who is legitimate? Wait. So Richard III was a legitimate heir from the medieval perspective of inheritance in England. So this is something that people seem to misunderstand about um, medieval rulership. Modern people think that primogeniture is it, right? Primogeniture. The eldest son always inherits. That is the legitimate rule of succession. In the Middle Ages, that is not true in Europe. It is
Go on.
right of arms is a very legitimate way to claim a throne. So
Mm,
just because you weren't the next in the line of succession doesn't mean that you're illegitimate just because when you win the war or a battle that gets you the crown, right? So Richard III is a legitimate king of England because he he claims the crown for himself, and
mm,
he's willing to defend it. And the same thing for Henry IV, right?
mm,
He usurps Richard II. He's not technically in the line of succession at that point, but he claims it by right of arms. So he's the legitimate next king. It's not like we think of inheritance, and the line of succession is not. It's
mm.
right of arms is a very legitimate medieval way to take a throne, is what I'm saying.
I love how we're getting worked up now on actual something to actually work getting worked up on. We were getting worked up on stupid modern stuff early on. Now we're actually arguing about the real argument. No, he's legitimate. No, I am legitimate. Ah! Meanwhile, I myself and the lads are just crowning somebody King of England in Dublin. We had the Dublin King. There's an entire book written on it, and in that one, we argue. Who is it we're meant to be arguing again for? Give us a second, because I seen one of the comments there saying that what was it? Richard III is a bastard. So I started looking that up because I was like,
It
who is
doesn't
this mother
matter.
again?
It's it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because in the
Hmm,
medieval English world, you don't need to be a legitimate anything. William the Conqueror was a
hmm.
bastard. Literally, they called him William the Bastard. He was not necessarily the next in line for the throne of England, but he took it, and therefore is the legitimate
Hmm.
king.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you haven't noticed, guys, we're actually
Yeah, we're
Yorkists.
Yorkists.
Just an argument. Yeah, I love how there's an argument kicked off between Yorkists and Lancastrians. This is what we should be arguing about. These stupid arguments these days where people are just like, I'm a blue colour, I'm a red colour. I don't care. Are you Yorkist or Lancastrian?
I
Are you
I
Catholic
am
or a
blue
Protestant?
and red with gold fleur-de-lis and gold lions and gold leopards.
Uh, Let me see. Do you have Wars of the Roses kit? Or is that your Wars of the Roses kit there?
No. This is Florence 1470s to 1490s. I mean, I do have a War of the Roses kit. This is not it. I didn't know we'd end up wandering down the path of the legitimacy of Richard III, so I didn't dress that way.
Having a real debate and argument here.
I mean, yeah.
Uh,
So I actually, and I think I remember reading something about his DNA being tested, but there's something contested about the way they did the DNA testing, about whether it's actually a good a legitimate result or not,
hmm.
claiming that he is not his brother's brother, or
That's
not
it.
his father's son.
Yeah, that's the argument that we try to make in Ireland is that Edward, Earl of Warwick, Lambert Simnel, we argue that he is in 1487, in the Irish Parliament, and concluded that he is the rightful king of England
Right.
and crowned him the Dublin King in 1487. Does it have a month? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a month here. But regardless, in 1487, in the Irish Parliament, and then brought over to the Dublin Cathedral, he was announced Dublin King, and the rightful King of England against the Tudors.
Right.
So that's awesome. So that's the argument that I make. You know, Lambert Simnel is the rightful King of England, not the harlequin, not the usurper. What was it? Henry Tudor. Fake news.
Right. Well, and Susan says Richard III was born in lawful wedlock. The discrepancy is with Edward IV. So there's a lot of debates, even amongst like PhD historians, about the legitimacy
Mm,
of Edward IV. But one of the big focuses of that claim is supposedly that his mother, Cecily Neville, claimed, um, basically told him, if you go ahead with this marriage with Elizabeth Woodville, this commoner,
mm,
I will tell everyone that you're illegitimate. Right? Like
mm.
she apparently threatened him with that.
Right.
But there's a lot of debate about whether she A, actually said that, and B, whether even if she said it, if she meant it, or if it wasn't just a threat to try to get him to back down and pursue the marriage with the French princess that uh, you know the Earl of Warwick and she both wanted. So yeah,
Mm,
there's the I'm not I honestly haven't seen solid evidence of Edward IV being illegitimate, and I haven't seen evidence of Richard III being illegitimate either. But it doesn't matter.
mm,
In the Game of Thrones, DNA don't matter in medieval Europe. It really doesn't. In the Game of
Mm,
Thrones, right makes might. Might makes right, rather. Might makes right.
mm.
And yeah.
I'm actually surprised. The bastard argument is a legitimate argument. I didn't realize there was such a massive deal online. I quickly looked it up on
Oh
Google
yeah,
there,
it's
and
huge.
loads of
Oh,
stuff.
it's huge.
As of right now, it's still put under a misconception because of rumors, and then any solid evidence that people have come from the Tudor era
Yeah,
later on. Of
yeah.
course, the Tudors would jump on top of him being a bastard.
That's the other problem, is that all of these historians like
Mm,
Polydor Virgil that are talking about this, some of them were alive at the time, but they only documented this decades later, and they're doing it under the Tudor dynasty, which means, again, this brings us back full circle to our discussion about history not necessarily being historical, but suiting
mm,
a certain political end, right? So those chroniclers writing in the reign of Henry VII and the reign of Henry VIII, they have every interest in the world to make the Yorkist claim to the throne look illegitimate, and every interest in the
mm.
world to make theirs, the Lancastrians, look as legitimate as possible. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Fun. See, this is what we should be arguing about. I'm even looking this up here, and my heart is like, yay,
yay!
research.
Oh, the joys!
Because I always end up looking at it from the perspective of the Dublin King. Because I didn't even question if Richard III was legitimate or not. I'm always in the argument of if Lambert Simnel is legitimate or not,
Right?
who was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Earl of Warwick.
If those pretenders were actually, in fact, the two princes, one of the two princes from the Tower, or not? Right? Like, that's
What do you mean, actually?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the 64,000 question, to date myself to a certain era of a certain game show in the U.S. Anyway, if people often ask me, I don't know if your people ask you this, if I could travel back in time, where would I go? Well, I don't want to
Yeah,
like
go on.
physically go there because I want to not die, but
Sure. Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
be maimed. But if I could open a window into the past,
Mm,
I would definitely open a window into the court of Richard III at about the time that those boys died, right? Those two princes
yeah.
vanished, right? Because that's what I really want to know is what
Mm,
actually happened to them and who ordered it, right? Like that's the interesting question. It doesn't make a difference in terms of how history has proceeded. It's just pure curiosity.
mm, mm, mm. It's believed, and I believe it as well, is that it was Henry Tudor that killed the two children, to be
I
quite
mean,
honest with you,
there's
if they
yeah,
were.
it's a big debate, right? Like some people say, well, it was
Yeah.
absolutely Richard. Some people say, well, it was Henry Tudor. It's like both of them had
Mm,
reasons where that would have
yeah.
made sense. In Richard III's case, it's actually not as cynical as some people might think. So we have to
Mm,
put ourselves in the mindset of Richard III, who has lived through a series of civil wars, right? Battles that are basically amount to a civil war for most of his life, right?
mm,
There's a period of peace in Edward IV's reign, but Richard probably can remember the time when there wasn't, right? And so
mm,
these two princes, his brother dies kind of unexpectedly, actually. His brother dies,
mm,
and these two boys, neither of them have reached their majority, and that is a recipe for civil unrest, right? These the
true.
new king being a minor, right? And who's
Mm,
going to have influence over the new king? And lots of people are going to try to have influence over him, and so it could just lead to more unrest. So Richard sweeps in, he takes the throne for himself, and then the thought is, well, if I let these boys live, there will always be another option, right? And that could
mm,
lead to more civil war. So, from a purely
yeah.
pragmatic perspective of I want my reign to not be plagued by constant political machinations and civil war, that means I have to eliminate these two potentially legitimate contenders for the throne.
Mm,
Right? It's not
yeah,
even.
yeah.
It's a really. It's actually. It's honestly. It's what any. For the most part, it's what any smart ruler would do. Unfortunately, it also, if he does get blamed for it in his own time, by the way, which is why he ends
Mm,
up with people who stand against him. One of the reasons there are people standing against him at Bosworth Field. because the rumor that he had ordered the death of these two boys horrifies enough of his own contemporaries that they decide they don't want to support him anymore, which I think
Mm.
that shocks a lot of people because from our modern mind, we just assume that medieval people were brutish sadists, basically, who had no sense of the value of human life and no sense of human kindness, but that's just not true. So,
Yeah.
even in his own era, and it was just a rumor, right? It was not substantiated. And
Mm.
it was definitely in Henry Tudor's favor to spread that rumor, by the way. That was
Oh yeah,
that
100%.
that that
That's what I'm
yeah,
arguing.
that would have been a brilliant piece of propaganda of of soft power, basically, of to
Mm.
undermine Richard's reign and his power and the people's faith in him.
Yeah, yeah. But that what you bring up there is a very good point as well. You slightly indicated on it there, and it was a point that Alex, the history guy, made last night on his channel. Well, his channel is called Alex, the history guy, and in his new video, the time travel to 15th century England, where he's covering the Wars of the
Right.
Roses, he pointed out that in his research of his area, I can't remember specifically where it is. It's where the Black Knight historians are based, and it just says England
Yeah, I think
here.
it's
I can't remember.
something on Weld, uh,
Yeah,
Downton on Weld, or something like that,
yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, yeah, I think you're right. But he pointed out in that local area that they were doing research and studying, he found that there was hardly any fighting during the Wars of the Roses. That community and stuff were very, very
Yep,
peaceful, and that's not the first time I've come across somebody
yep,
pointed that out. That during the Wars of the Roses, their local community that they were researching it, there was little to no violence
yeah,
whatsoever. And when there was violence, violence was happening way over there, was very sudden, very horrible. Don't
yeah,
get me wrong. Like you're talking about, tens of thousands of young men killed in a single
yep,
battle on a single day. Horrible stuff, and definitely had effects on the local community. But there were people during the Wars of the Roses in England who were born and throughout their entire life during the period of the Wars of the Roses saw no violence whatsoever. They couldn't even tell you what violence looked
yep,
like, you know.
yep, yeah,
So
yeah. It's
that was a very as
and
well.
that's very true. So that's we when most people imagine warfare, they imagine total war. They imagine World War
Yeah.
II. They imagine World War One, especially World War II, though, where the cities are just getting bombed and civilian
Mm,
populations are dying in droves, and it's everywhere. Right, it's everywhere and it's
yeah.
all the time, and people basically are just living in constant fear of their city being blown up. Right, but
Mm,
that's not the war. The Wars of the Roses, and calling it the wars actually really, that's what I think twists it in people's minds, is that they
yeah.
expect then for 60 years, England is just in a constant state of warfare. But it isn't. You're right. There are many,
Mm,
many places in England and Scotland and Wales that are never touched by any battles at all. They
mm,
see no damage from this conflict. The only damage they see are when they send their menfolk out to go and
mm,
participate in these campaigns, and the menfolk don't come back, or they come back
yeah.
maimed, right? But they don't actually directly experience the horrors of war, and the
Mm,
economy keeps going. Like the Pastons flourish during the Wars of the Roses, the Cousins War. They flourish. Their
mm,
businesses grow. Their fortunes rise. They go from being sort of yeomen and migrate their way up into being minor gentry, working in the service of dukes like the Duke of Suffolk and the Duke of Norfolk. And
mm,
they become MPs in Parliament, right? So for some people, the Wars of the Roses are a great time. It isn't just this endless horror. And now in France, in in France, for more or less most of the Hundred Years' War, it's pretty rough because they've got all those
yeah.
roving packs of mercenaries who,
Mm,
if they don't have an active contract, make up for the difference by just constantly looting and raiding. So it is rough in
mm.
France, but that's not the Wars of the Roses in
Yeah.
England.
Yeah, massively. Because it's the same thing in Ireland as well. Ireland also very, very peaceful. Like you get this idea of 800 years of British occupation. There was loads and loads of people at this point, even people who would have had ancestors that would have been Norse or French or English, even at that point in the 15th century. All of these people would have seen themselves as Irish people in that community. They all spoke Irish, some
Right.
form of Irish. As you know, most of the time we're trying to highlight the fact that these guys, had different clothing and stuff coming in, but they were all dressing the similar within their community. And also, a very interesting thing that Alex brings up last night is the fact that if you had a stranger going into these communities, that a lot of these communities were less than 100 people. When a stranger came in, they were a big deal. They were like, oh, who's this person? No, don't get me wrong. When the trader comes in, they would have seen the trader a good few times
Hmm.
in their lifetime.
Right.
He also, I reckon, would have been made a big deal of as well, like, because this person's bringing so much foreign
Yep.
news, from the wider world, which is crazy to think that information from down the road is foreign news. What are the foreigners down the road doing?
Right. Yeah. Those people, those weirdos from that other village.
Mm.
Let's see. I'm not gonna. I don't want to wander down modern politics. So even though I may agree with some of those comments, I'm not going to address them. Yeah. Happy New Year, Shuriken. Yeah. This is someone was asking about my teacup. This is a replica of a Goryeo era teacup. So the Goryeo era in Korea is the Middle Ages, what we consider the Middle
Oh,
Ages.
nice.
So this one dates
Mm,
to I think the 13th century. You can see the
mm.
cranes on it, the auspicious cranes. And this is a
That
technique
is
called
gorgeous.
celadon. And my cats haven't
Mm.
broken this one yet. So yay. Yeah.
Nice. How many historical cups have you gotten broken over the
Oh,
years
yeah.
from your
So
cats?
I have a cabinet full of replica medieval Korean pottery, mostly
Mm,
tea related, that will be eventually I will kintsugi it back together. I have a kintsugi kit, but I unfortunately the kit does not have labels or instructions. So I actually need someone to
mm.
help me identify all of the materials in this kit and tell me how to use
Right.
them. I have an idea, but not with this kind of, because I'm working with gold and with
Mm.
resins and epoxies that are
Ah,
actually toxic. So I need more than an idea. I really need detailed instructions. But
mm, mm.
that's the plan. Yeah, I've got a tea set worth of broken pottery in a cabinet, basically.
The joys.
Kitties for the win.
For sure. What
Yeah.
else do we have here?
Yeah. So, we kind of started this whole thing by talking about terms, historical terms that maybe we should reconsider. And we started with Anglo-Saxon, and then we've wandered into the War of the Roses. So I think this is fair for us. Maybe we can talk about what are your feelings about the term medieval, right? So this is a term that I hate using, but I have to for the sake of the algorithm, right?
Yeah, my wife, by the way, if no one knows my wife is actually born in Japan, and her foundation is Japanese history. During the warring period, going from around the ninth century, where it's very peaceful, and then suddenly around 1190, sorry, 1120, 1190, you have the rise of the Minamoto, and then you go into the warring period. And from the foreigner perspective, now with the Japanese, these things are put in the eras of the emperor and stuff. There's not a sudden, "Oof, this is the medieval period." So, from a foreigner's perspective, um, they have categorized Japanese history into, Japanese feudalism and stuff. And because the Japanese were very switched on when they opened up Japan, they suddenly became very switched
Right.
on to what the Westerners are up to. They were able to kind of adapt and change their history into English history,
Right.
in particular.
Right.
So they were compared to the Irish. Like, a lot of people these days look at Irish history and think, God, this history here is stupid. These people must be stupid, and that's because the Irish, especially from a medieval perspective, even today, right now. I was watching a video there from an alleged Irish historian who, she's very good. She's very good at modern stuff, but her brain couldn't understand medieval history.
Right.
So even today, including Irish people, have no understanding about Irish history, Irish medieval history whatsoever. Compared to the Japanese, at least the Japanese haven't just managed to make it digestible, but have managed to advertise it so well. Because when you think of medieval Japan, what do you think of? The samurai.
Right.
You think of those specific castles. Compared to Ireland, Ireland has wonderful, amazing medieval history, but they're so terrible at advertising it
Yeah.
in
So true.
2026.
So true.
Mm. I think we had a little bit of a peak in the 80s with St. Patrick. Anytime you think of medieval Ireland, you would think of St. Patrick with the crozier and stuff. But that image is starting to fade now. And we just, in this year, haven't found that perfect image yet to try to advertise Irish medieval history. So go on.
No, I was going to say, I think if you asked any average American what a medieval Irish person looked like, they would probably imagine someone in a 19th century kilt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it.
that would be it.
And even Yeah, and the problem is, even the Irish themselves, no idea about their own Irish medieval history. It is, as they scream from the top of their voice, for propaganda reasons, and it is because of Ireland only recently finishing up fighting in 1998, and even on top of that, the occupation isn't over. It's still there up in
Yeah,
Northern Ireland, so it's still there as a heavy scar that's ready to burst at any moment.
yeah,
So I understand when I try to counter the idea of 800 years of British occupation, which, technically speaking, it didn't exist. It never happened. I try to highlight the fact of I understand the feeling of 800 years of occupation, especially when someone is trying to burn down your
yeah.
house. That feeling is fully alive.
Right. But
But
so
regard on,
yeah, so the issue is, of course, what does medieval mean now? Right? So
mm,
this is a term that we use all the time. We use the term medieval. Um,
yeah,
but what does it mean? And it covers such a wide and disparate period of history, 1,000 years, that doesn't
mm,
even have any meaning, actually.
mm,
Right. So that's, it's like Anglo-Saxon, right? What does that actually mean in terms of
mm,
understanding of a history or a culture or a people? There's some, if I like my random association with the term Anglo-Saxon, like visual association, is actually the riders of Rohan from Lord of the Rings. Like, I imagine you say Anglo-Saxon and I imagine Rohan from the
mm,
Lord of the Rings, but that's, you know that's not the entirety of that. That's just a quick association, but actually it's not necessarily a useful term, because then people start thinking of the Middle Ages as a monolith, right? They
yeah,
think, well, medieval equals this. Like, we've got this gentleman keeps talking about serfdom. Serfdom
mm,
only exists in very specific parts of Europe, and not all of it, for
yeah,
very relatively short amount of time. By the 15th century,
absolutely.
serfdom in England is done. It's mostly a
Yeah,
done deal. It's gone, right? That
mm,
system has been replaced by other systems, more or less equitable, depending on how you look at it, right? The
mm,
system of levying soldiers through the feudal ties in the 15th century, that's going away. Mostly people,
mm,
depending on where you are, you send money to the ruler to cover the cost of maintaining an army, but you don't send a troop. You don't send your own personal troop to go do that, right? So,
yeah,
that's why I think, like, we're re-examining the use of the term Anglo-Saxon. Maybe we should also be re-examining the term medieval, and
mm,
maybe trying to move away from that. It's, I mean, what the word medieval literally means, right? Like, what
Middle
yeah, Middle
Ages.
Ages.
Middle is
But it's the middle
yeah,
of what? Right? Like, that's
mm,
that's the thing. What is it the middle of? It's the middle of the ancient world and the modern world.
mm,
Is it useful to have that definition? That Not that
mm.
definition. Is it useful? Is that a useful definer? Is that a useful adjective, actually?
The problem from my perspective, I do think there is a sudden switch that happens, because there is a switch that happens in Europe where we're going more away from Rome and Constantinople, and we're starting to connect ourselves more to Beijing. And it's not just like, okay, Beijing is wrong, more connected to kind of the Silk Road, because during the ancient era, we were very kind of disconnected from the trade links into India, and we weren't like disconnected, but a lot of Europeans had no understanding of how the trade worked going into India and how it worked going into Cambodia and stuff. But as we go into the early medieval period, we're starting to get more connected into India and into Cambodia and stuff. Now, I know that's not how we're studying medieval history right now. It's only in the last 10 years that we've started to take the Silk Road more and more seriously, and we've stopped looking at it as a singular road from Beijing to Constantinople. We're now looking at it from the wider perspective. Um, so I think there'll still be some form of word that's there where we see the West making those changes with the quote unquote fall of the Roman Empire,
Right.
and then vice versa with the East with the War of the Three Kingdoms. Because this is where I'm very, very ignorant. Okay, so if anybody in the comment section wants to correct me on this, or Rachel wants to correct me on
Oh,
this,
not likely.
but
Go on.
even China itself and even Japanese people I've spoken to, is there is a changing point happening around 300 AD with the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, where you have the collapse of one old ancient society and then going into a new society,
Right.
right? So I do see both in the East after the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, and then over in the West with the changes that are happening there. And Beijing is somebody, or I don't even know if they're using the word medieval in Beijing, but they are pushing for more and more inclusion of this change that happens, especially with the Silk Road, because Beijing are so proud that the Silk Road is theirs. Now, obviously, history is 1,000 times more complicated than the perspective that Beijing has of right now, especially when they were advertising this big, massive show in most museums in Hong Kong, Tokyo, and then over to London as well, where the main picture and the main image that they showed off was a horse galloping on top of a nomad. It was a big statue
Right.
that they had constructed in Beijing around the what we would consider the early medieval period.
Right.
And Beijing was very proud of this image, which I can't remember if it was you who said it or Yuki said it. She thought it was very funny because it wasn't long until the nomad, because that's the image of a galloping person galloping on top of you is an image that the Mongolians would use
Yeah.
later on, because they are the nomads. So it's very funny that Beijing used the symbol of a horse to show that they have conquered the lands of the nomads. And then vice versa, the Mongolians would go in to use the symbol of a man galloping to show that they are the nomads conquering the civilized people. So I do see there always being some form of a word there, especially when we're looking at there when we have some form of an ancient period beforehand that's layered into different groups, and then there's some kind of change that happens around 300 AD to the 5th century to the 6th century, some form of change that's happening there. And then as we're going up to around the 1600s, both in Ireland and Japan, I know some other places end their medieval history around 450, but definitely both in Japan and Ireland, by 1603, a lot of those people end this change that was happening. They cut it off there and then. And then from the early modern period onwards, we have a different change that's happening.
Right.
So my perspective, I always see that there always will be a word, either Middle Ages or medieval.
Yeah. See, my problem with the term medieval, and it's Emma points this out, it's that medieval for many people is an adjective that is a synonym for backwards, barbaric, filthy,
Yeah.
dirty, undeveloped. And
Mm.
that 1,000 years of history is not even vaguely the same across that. Even pick
Yes.
any one place, even just not even Europe being a monolith. Just pick Dublin,
Yeah.
right? And follow Dublin across that 1,000 years of history, and it's not at all the same. So my problem with the
No.
term is that it comes with a lot of this clever historian said this. I was listening to a history podcast on medievalist.net, and she said actually about the term peasant, but this applies to medieval as well. The term does a lot of the thinking for us, right? It comes with
Mm.
so many preconceptions, many of them so wrong that it's laughable, that it doesn't actually have meaning anymore. And it's why a lot of modern historians these days are trying to walk away from terms like peasant, because that also comes with all of this baggage of someone who's poor, someone who's slaving away in the fields and maybe being whipped by the Lord, right? And that's not what peasants were at all, for the most part. So that's my objection to the term medieval, is that it's been so overwrought and so overused and abused and twisted that it almost has no meaning anymore. It's like in any post that I make, I have to say, in medieval society, caveat, Europe is not a monolith. It's 1,000 years of history, which is not a monolith. Your mileage will vary. I have to say that because invariably some pedant in the comments is going to say, well, in the 11th century, in the Iberian Peninsula, in Andorra, it wasn't like that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's almost more useful for us to be more specific and identify the century in question rather than to just say medieval. But the algorithm will not permit that, will it, Philip? We can't do that. We can't.
Yeah, it's like the term Viking. I put Viking in it, boof, my algorithm explodes. It's always those pop words. But thankfully, Celtic is actually dying. I think Celt is the only one that's actually dying.
Oh,
I'm better off putting in terms like Gaelic rather than Celt,
right,
weirdly
right,
enough. So
yeah.
there is some terms that are dying off, but terms like medieval or what was it called? Viking, for example, they're booming as always. And geez, I have such a funny relationship with that word Viking as well.
I do
Just
too.
because,
I do too.
yeah, it's ran for an umbrella term and to simplifies things. Like sometimes instead of saying, the men of Dublin or saying, the Ustmen or whatever term is in that time, I'll just be like, because I need people to suddenly know what I'm talking about, I'll just be like, oh, the Irish Vikings. For some strange reason, I say Irish Vikings and people click straight away that these are, the men of Dublin I'm talking about. So the term is really handy for those quick, poof, that's them. Compared to, I think this is why Celtic dies, because you can replace that word with Gaelic.
Right,
It's very difficult to replace because terms like what was it, Gaul Gael or Men of Dublin. Men of Dublin could be bloody anything,
right.
I know that's literally what they call themselves in the 9th and 10th century. But if you say Men of Dublin, people will be like, oh, do you mean the 15th century? Because Dublin still exists in the 15th century. And they are right, don't get me
Men
wrong.
of Dublin
Um,
sounds like an Irish punk band. I'll just be honest.
yeah, there you go. Somebody else also commented in the comment section, Fair Olid, the men of Ulster, the men of the north of
Right.
Ireland. You could literally apply those terms to anywhere.
Also a punk
Um,
band.
yeah, there you go. Do you know?
Yeah,
So it is handy to use terms, and we were even arguing about that at the very start, like Anglo-Saxon, for example. It's handy to have those as umbrella terms, but the problem is that people become too associated with it.
yeah,
As the what was it, the earlier English Society in Cambridge had pointed out, is that people now think that the Anglo-Saxons were unified. They weren't
right.
unified. They were Northumberland, Wessex, East Anglia, Mercia, Cromwell, all hated each other. In fact, Cromwell wasn't even Anglo-Saxon. They considered themselves a part of the Britannic world.
Right.
So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's basically those various peoples all just kind of eventually melded into the English, right?
Mm,
That was ultimately their identity. But then there came the distinction between, well, are you Norman or are
mm,
you not Norman? Right?
yeah.
It's these terms. It can be really tricky. Renaissance. Someone, is it Susan? Yeah, Susan brings up the term Renaissance, which is also really challenging, right? Because Renaissance is a term that is invented in the Renaissance. It's very self-identifying. It's Giorgio Vasari who
Mm,
actually he writes the lives of the great artists. He's the reason that we really think of Raphael and Michelangelo and Leonardo as these great artists, because he said they were. He was an artist. He
yeah.
was a 16th century Italian artist and sculptor, and architect who basically decided he was going to write he was going to biograph these, what he considered to be the great artists. And
Mm,
he's the one who quotes the term the Renaissance, but his idea of the Renaissance is that it's a renaissance of art and architecture. He's not talking about philosophy or humanism or any of that. For him, it's just all
mm,
about the art. Right. And he
mhm,
actually says that he identifies the Renaissance as being different from what came before, and that what came before focused more on the Greek way of representing people, the icons,
mm,
right? But
Yeah.
now they're going back to the ancient Roman way of representing people, which was very, very realistic. So
Mm,
that's for him, that's what the Renaissance is all about. And he's the one who basically says Giotto is the first Renaissance artist. Everyone who came before him is medieval. So
mm,
so yeah, that term Renaissance now though, now the term Renaissance thinks for us. If you say the word Renaissance, there's a whole package that comes with it that Vasari never meant. He never intended for that to be part of the Renaissance package. Because in fact, the so-called Renaissance was pretty gruesome politically in Italy. It was
mm.
a violent dark time. It really was. Um,
Just quickly looking up that one because I think the answer, who considered themselves Brittonic, I'm sure it was the Romans who first referred to them
are you not
as
you
Brittonic.
talking about the Britons like the yeah, I
Yeah,
think the Romans are the ones who I think Caesar is possibly one of the first people to
yeah,
coin
you're
that
bang on
turn of
right.
phrase.
Julius Caesar, yeah, you're bang on right. I
Yeah.
just literally seen it as you were saying it. You beat me to it. Yeah, he coins the phrase bum, 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 Britannic. And then is there not somebody who goes off and maps that area beforehand as well? I'm sure there's an even earlier reference to referring to them as the Britannic people. I know the Irish, like the Odonians and stuff, the Hibernians. That's just,
Yeah.
they refer to us as
The
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 Hibernicus.
people of the winter. You guys are literally the
Yeah,
people of the winter.
yeah, cool. I love it. I think it's
Hibernia.
cool. I know. We were talking about like labels and stuff. I know the Italian, what was it? The Romans labeled us as a bunch of savage, naked cannibals and all that
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Stay away.
But
Beware. Go back.
I think Hibernicus is a pretty cool word. And it's quite funny as well because Hibernicus, I was looking this up the other day as well. Hibernicus reappears then in the Crusader period, and it's one to celebrate because it's like, look at these people. They come all the way from Ireland to take part in this
Right.
crusade. Aren't they great? So Hibernicus in the 13th century is a real kind of like, look how great. If they can go to work, you can go to work too, do you know? So anytime you see the word Hibernicus being used of the clergies in mainland Europe, specifically the French clergy, it's always a kind of like, look, the Irish came all the way from Ireland to go and crusade. Could you bother go crusading, huh? No, terrible, do you know?
Right. So there's some comments here about Renaissance. So I mean, to me, Renaissance means basically modern banking when the Italian state started to take over the trade from the Byzantine Empire in the
Mm,
11th century. Well, that is definitely not what most historians define as the Renaissance, but I definitely think I agree for 100% that the Renaissance starts way earlier than most people think it does. Because for me, there is a dark age, and it's the Justinian plague. The
yeah,
150 years ish of the Justinian plague is absolutely a dark time in Europe. 90% of the
mm,
population dies. I think that counts as dark by most standards of
mm,
darkness.
mm,
And that's when all of the technology that was the infrastructure of the Western Roman Empire crumbles because
mm.
there isn't enough critical mass to maintain it. And the knowledge about it is lost because when 90% of your population dies, that's game over for your
Yeah,
civilization. So I
yeah,
would say that the so-called Renaissance actually begins with Charlemagne, right? Like he's the
mm,
one to really start bringing it back. And
yeah, yeah.
it's not necessarily a straight line from there because I mean, Philip, for you, is human civilization, does it follow a straight upward trajectory? Have we just always been improving for thousands of years?
Can I rant about Irish history again? Now what was it, 800 years doesn't happen,
Right,
because you're bang on right. Because if you look at Ireland, like don't get me wrong, the Justinian plague hits Ireland and it hits Ireland heavy. Like it
yeah,
changes. We went from Bronze Age fortifications. We get the idea of cities, and instead of building cities, we build monastic settlements, and then we're just like, okay, everybody become farmers and everybody goes off and builds their own independent farmstead ring forts. That's so bizarre and weird.
right,
The reason why it happens, and a lot of academics, especially archaeologists, believe it happens is because the Justinian plague had such an impact that all the clans in Ireland in these big, massive Celtic Bronze Age forts were
Right.
just like, nah, I'm not living with any of the rest of you anymore. I'm building my own farmstead ring fort. So they build these little tiny ring forts all over, literally dotted all over Ireland. And these survive as Ireland goes into a golden age. So we get hit very heavy with the Justinian plague. We
Right.
manage to very quickly jump back. We don't have a dark age in the perspective that Europe would have had. In
Right.
fact, it was documented. So we have Dermot MacCurbal, who was King of Ireland at the time. Sadly, ends up getting sacrificed. He was the last pagan king, and still ends up getting sacrificed
uh,
because he basically gets the blame for the Justinian plague. So the pagans still get a hold of him
yeah,
and
you
just
know.
outright murder him. They give him a threefold. But
Oh,
regardless,
that's rough.
he oh aye, what was it? They set fire to him, they drown him, and they stab him, or they stab him, they burn him. It's on those things of stabbing, burning, and then drowning. Threefold the death, and it's the idea of drowning while you're burning is the supernatural magic in it. If you've ever
Right.
come across a threefolded death before. Regardless, Dermot MacCurbal gets the old threefolded debt. He's gone, and Ireland then continues ploughing on to and another person that bloody ruins port. Anyway, I'll get back to my actual chat because I could end up talking all day about that one. But Ireland then goes into a golden age, but it's a golden age of saints and scholars. Then the Vikings come in around what was it 793 to around 820. You then have the Viking Age, right? And
Right.
this is the funny thing is that everyone sees Ireland as being kind of this kind of bitch nation where the Vikings come in, they can't defend themselves, and they wipe them out. That is not the study of Claire Downham. Don't get me wrong. There's a change that happens, as in the Vikings do come in and they wreck up all the coastal church areas that are not protected. But the Vikings, the moment they try to go inland, are completely wiped out by the Irish. The Irish have a force of 8,000 troops because the Irish they do have a confederation, so they're not unified in the perspective of a centralized government that we have in England. And I always try to highlight this with people because people are like, oh no, they have 150 tribes, they're always warring against each other. And I'm like, it doesn't actually work like that. What you do have is a confederation of war bands, clans, that are brought together by a high king for a purpose or goal. Your country is being invaded. I think the goal is quite easy here for the Confederation
Right.
of the ENL. So they're led by Mayor Shocknell, right? And right now, Ireland has a system where it's the ENLs, whoever's on top of their dynasty at the time, they're kind of the royal blood of Ireland. You do what they say. So the moment something like this happens, whack. And that's what happens. Turgis comes in with a force of only 120. Mail Shocknell is just like, okay, let's raise up the military force. Military force is 8,000. Little bit too big. So he sends out people to go and ambush and kill him. Regardless, that's it. That's the dark age of this medieval period that happens. Claire Downham then argues around, what was it? Especially around 870 to 820, 920, sorry. So from 870 to 920, Ireland goes into an economic golden age. So there is a shift, a little dip, what you see there, between what was it, 793 to around 870. But that's massive. Yeah, exactly, Mayor Shocknell. But that's a change. And what ends up happening then from around 870 up to around, I would say, 1030, you have an economic golden age. Ireland goes into an economic golden age where there's so much massive, more money than any other period in Ireland. This is like the
Yeah.
peak of economic golden age. Why is this happening? Because Ireland is running its own protection racket outside of Dublin, dominating its piece of the Silk Road, right? So Ireland, for a short period of time, because of the Viking trade routes, is dominating, right? You have these fellas called the Gaul Gael. Its direct translation is foreign Irish, basically the Irish Vikings. These people are outside of the clan system. They're pretty much, people that are doing their own thing, but they're running the Irish protection racket, the Viking protection racket in their own region. And so what you see again, once again, is a golden age, right? Compared to the history that we are given, where, the Irish have been dictated by the Vikings, right? The Battle of Clontarf, which is from a modern nationalist perspective, is the Irish versus the Vikings, was in fact a rebel. Brian Boru had taken over the High Kingship at that point, referred to himself as Emperor of the Scots. He did it all in Latin as well, because he
I
was
mean,
copying
that's how you
Charlemagne.
get legitimacy in the Middle Ages, my friend. Latin. Latin means you're a
Yeah.
legitimate ruler and emperor, right?
Mm. And it's recognized by the papacy. Charlemagne and the papacy see this, by the way. The moment it's written in Latin and sent over to them, that's it. They take that very seriously. It's like, well done, Ireland. Well done. It's not a case of, it's not like in the East with Beijing. The moment when Japan turns around and says, oh, I'm an emperor too. Beijing is like, you can't be an emperor. That's not the case in Ireland. In Ireland, France and Italy is like, oh, well done, Ireland. Well done.
Right.
Latin good. We like Latin. Emperor good. So it's not seen as a bad thing. And so, what was it called? So what you have there is an economic golden age.
Right.
Then there's a dip again. There's a dip, and historians are researching into why did this dip happen, and we can see the dip because of the changing of coins. Coins change, and they actually get worse. So they hit their peak of economic golden age around 1030 under the administration of Silkenbeard.
Right.
And his protection racket is insanely feared. Like you've bitched about this before, Rachel. His Vikings are going around dressed in silk
Yeah.
into skirmishes and battles.
That's a
right?
baller
So
move right there, my friend.
whoa, so these men are massively feared. However, somewhere around, especially going into the 12th century, there's suddenly a massive, especially after 1103, once the slave market has been removed from Dublin, that's where you see a massive drop, especially with the Normans. The Normans are definitely enforcing the papal will, and the papal will is basically slavery bad. So they're trying to completely wipe out the slave market. So then you see this dip again, right? So this dip does exist for a long time until eventually, and I hate romanticizing the Normans, but when the Normans come back into Ireland again, what you see, now don't get me wrong, there's another dip during the Crusader period. There's another high pit under Turlough O'Connor. So Turlough O'Connor takes over and he brings Ireland back into another form of a kind of golden age of saints and scholars, an economic golden age, which happens around 1140. So around 1140, there's another good dip again. But then once his son takes over, Rory O'Connor is an absolute terrible leader. And what ends up happening is that you have the Norman invasion of Ireland around 1169. And of course, that's a dip down again. But then around 1220, the Normans have become somewhat Gaelicized-ish around 1220 because you have the likes of the De Burghs who marry into the O'Briens, you have the De Lacys who marry into the O'Connors. And what happens there is they're now building stone castles. On top of that, Ireland is now fully reconnected into a major trade network again in France. So where you had to dip down, you now have a dip up.
Right.
And you can see that, like Rachel, I know for a fact, thousands of examples around 1190 of Henry II and what's happening in France of another. Some people even are referring to it as kind of like little mini Renaissance, especially between the period of the Anjou. And on top of that as well, later on, you have the rise of Frederick II in Sicily. Yeah. So it's definitely not, like a lot of people are arguing if that's a Renaissance period or not.
Yeah, I mean, Frederick II, he's a nutter, but he's fun. He's fun. If any of you want to read a really fun biography, read the biography of Frederick II of Sicily. He is he's a nut job, locking people in boxes and seeing if he can watch their souls leave, if the box can contain their souls when they die.
Well, for the guy in the box, I wouldn't say that was, a golden age of anything or a Renaissance. But you could make the argument that under Frederick II and Henry II of England, that there was somewhat of a mini Renaissance.
No, I mean, absolutely. The 12th century is its own peak, its own golden age, right? In Western Europe, after the first and second crusade, but especially the first crusade. Reconnected a bunch of the Western Europeans, the Franks, with Arabic culture. In the Iberian Peninsula, that connection had always been there. And in southern France, that connection had also always been there, courtesy of its connection to Iberia. But especially for the northern parts of France, England, Ireland, Scotland, right? Germany, the Crusades connect all of those knights and their ladies who go with them, by the way,
Mm,
to the culture of the Levant. And in that era, the culture of the Levant is very courtly. It's
mm,
full of poetry, it's full of art, it's full of romance, it's full of music, it's full of song. I said poetry, I don't know, but if I didn't, I'll say it again, poetry. And so they get connected to that culturally because the early Crusader states are not really an us versus them on a cultural level. They're a melting pot. And so they bring all of that back with them to Europe. And so by the second half of the 12th century, there's this flourishing of the writing of romances of courtly love. And that absolutely leads, at least for the upper levels of society, that leads to a cultural flourishing. So yeah,
mm.
and fashion as well. 12th century fashions, you can see an absolute sharp difference between 11th century fashions in France and England and 12th century fashions, especially the second half of the 12th century. Things get real fancy. Men
Yeah.
are wearing these fitted tunics. Men and women are wearing these fitted tunics called bliot that have trains, men as
Mm,
well, long full sleeves, beautiful layers, smocking, gorgeous embroidery and applique around necklines and cuffs and armbands. It's just absolutely stunning and really fitted. A lot of
mm.
people say that the 13th century is, or 14th century, sorry, the 14th century is where fashion really gets its start. But 12th century, there is a big deal about fashion and a development of fitted garments, really fitted garments, and complex tailoring techniques. So,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely, I agree. There is a renaissance, if we want to use that word, in the 12th
Yeah.
century as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
because it was Gone Medieval, the podcast. If you don't listen to Gone Medieval podcast, you should definitely listen to them because they're absolutely magnificent. They're arguing, a lot of their academics are arguing that there was a Renaissance going on, and
Yeah.
you'd think they would mostly be arguing Henry II. They're not. They're mostly
Mhm.
arguing what the court was like under Frederick II in
Yeah.
Sicily and his Holy Roman Empire, which is interesting in itself because a lot of people, when you say Holy Roman Empire, you think, and this goes back to your main argument about the medieval period isn't a one big giant dip, it's a fact. And then suddenly you're having a renaissance and going back up. It's an up and down effect. You have this roller coaster effect of, sometimes we're doing very well, sometimes we're dipping down. Exactly what you're seeing here
Yeah.
during the early, was it the, are we medieval modern period or something, I don't even know anymore, but anyway, the same thing as the thing today where you have this, we're doing super magnificent in 1984, America, Ireland, amazing. Right now 2026, not so good,
Not
so
so
we're
good.
not seeing a straight line. We're seeing an up and down effect going on. And so it definitely is true. What was it? Oh, yeah. So they're mostly arguing with Frederick II. But it's very interesting because we're seeing this kind of dip down again straight away after the death, not just of the death of the Frederick II, but we see total war kicking off in places like England with the arrival of Edward I. Edward I, really amazing when winning wars, but life under Edward I, especially in Ireland, is terrible. His
Yeah.
administration in Ireland is horrific. Very good under what was it called? Henry III. Henry III's administration in Ireland, especially under the likes of the marshals and the butlers and stuff, absolutely magnificent. Horrible. Once Edward I takes over, oh my God, the administration in Ireland is horrific. And then on
Right.
top of that as well, we have the mini ice age that comes in. So I would not call that a renaissance in my perspective. I don't know what you think, Rachel, but I wouldn't say,
No,
you know,
it's a the 13th, yeah, the yeah, it goes in cycles, right? It's
mm,
just like the economy now. It's
yeah,
just that back then the economic cycles moved more slowly than they do now. But
uh,
with the economy, it's the economy, stupid, right? That's what Bill Clinton was advised of, and that's how he won his first election. It's the economy, stupid. So
mm,
as the economy flourishes, so too does culture,
yeah,
because in a flourishing economy, there is the luxury, the leisure to be able to explore the softer side of life. But
mm,
when the economy tanks, all you care about is not starving and not dying of exposure, right? Like
oh, is
it's,
that a
which,
fact?
so yeah, it's all about, it's all in the, civilization moves in cycles. And I think that's part of one of the reasons that a lot of people like to look, maybe don't even like to, they just do.
Mm.
They reflect back on the Middle Ages and they say to themselves, oh, we are so superior in every way, in every metric.
Yes.
They had it all so badly for the whole Middle Ages, just so much worse than we do. We're so superior. But when
Mm.
you actually start comparing apples to apples and looking at how happy people were, how, their pace of life, the kinds of, their nutrition, you start realizing, oh, maybe, or their hygiene, maybe we're not as superior as we like to think we are.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah.
There's a few questions for you there in the comment section there, Rachel, if you want to have a look.
Yeah, let's see. Uh, do you think the Gomlek inspired tighter fitted garments? Maybe, absolutely, actually, quite possibly. Yeah. So, yeah, Huss creates. So this is basically like this fitted coat over thing, over garment. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that is a distinct possibility.
Mm.
And if you look at also the sort of the layering effect, and I think possibly also the trims and the embroideries. Philip, have you ever been to Vienna? Have you ever been to the
No,
Treasury in Vienna? Oh
no,
my God,
you're
my
gonna
friend.
crucify me. I got crucified by
Oh,
Yuki last night. You're gonna crucify me. Yeah.
Jesus,
I,
Jesus, man.
I
Oh,
swear I'm not putting the two of you into a room because it's going to end up on a live stream or something where you're pinning me down at one side with a nail and Yuki's going to be on the other side nailing me down. And you're just going to leave me there crucified in a bit of Thailand or somewhere. I don't know, Korea like. So, no, I'm not
right.
letting the two of you together.
So the Imperial Treasury in Vienna has an amazing collection of medieval artifacts from the Holy Roman Empire, right?
Mm.
They have the Spear of Longinus, for instance.
Ah.
Um, but among them are royal imperial coronation regalia dating back 1,000 years in some cases.
Mm.
And so they have a coronation cloak that actually was from Roger of Sicily's cloak, but it's in Vienna now. But it's this amazing coronation cloak from the 12th century. And it actually is embroidered with Kufic writing around the edges, Arabic writing. The entire border is Kufic. It's Arabic letters all the
Mm.
way around it's this giant semicircular cloak. So it's like half of a circle, literally. And around all of the edges are Kufic.
Mm.
And so that shows, the kind of direct impact, not even theoretical or, oh, I have to squint hard to see the connection. No, no, no. There's Arabic letters on this Holy Roman Empire coronation vestment.
Mm.
So that definitely indicates just how impactful being in that part of the Mediterranean was, Sicily in that case, and also the Crusades, how having the Crusader states, the Frankish states in the Levant was for Western European fashion, 100%.
Jesus. That's absolutely magnificent.
Yeah.
Um, There was one question as well. The problem is with Ireland, it was to do with what was it she was referring to as the potato famine. I don't
Ah,
call it just to start with, I don't refer to it as the potato famine because I call it the Great Hunger. Because I do
yeah.
not believe that what was it, a million Irish, and there was also Bangladesh as well is heavily affected by this as well. I do not believe the Irish were killed off because of a famine, a blight that went in there and killed, what was it, 2 to 3 million Irish, right?
Yeah.
The thing is that you're talking about the 19th century when the diet of
Yeah.
the Irish should be much more larger. But this didn't just happen in Ireland. This also happened in
Yeah.
Bangladesh, where the British were running the administration. And yet, for many, many excuses and reasons, under British administration, thousands of people, I'm not even talking about thousands, I'm talking about 2 to 3 million.
Millions.
I don't know
Millions.
what the million was, sorry, the
Yeah.
numbers were in Bangladesh, but the numbers in Ireland went to 2 to 3 million. That makes absolutely no sense in the 19th century, right? And I don't think anybody should be turning around and saying, oh, that was a potato blight that killed all those people. Those people that had meat and other fish, etc., etc., And
Yep.
yet, eyewitness account from my own grandmother, great grandmother, states that anytime they went to try to go fishing, anytime they tried to go hunting, they were
Yep.
purposely
They
shot
they were
by British.
Yeah, they were stopped. It
Yeah,
was a government conspiracy.
yeah,
It was 100%. No,
mm,
absolutely, I agree with that.
yeah,
Because the potato blight didn't just affect Ireland.
yeah,
All the potatoes in all of Europe
mm,
were impacted, but not all of Europe died off from it,
yeah, yeah,
you know? So
yeah,
even though in Germany, where they were absolutely very heavily dependent on the potato in the
mm,
19th century. Now, granted, a lot of people did immigrate because there was a food shortage, but
mm,
it wasn't like it was in Ireland. So yeah,
yeah.
no, that was yeah, I agree. You should call it the great dying.
Yeah.
Um,
It's referred to because the original video, because I know why you guys are bringing it up, because the original video that Finn Dwyer had brought out 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's done an entire body of work on this for the last few years. He's on YouTube, Irish History, and also he's most of his really really good work is on Spotify, Irish History as well. He has concluded, and he refers to it as the Great Hunger. He does not
yeah,
call it the Great Famine. Okay, or the potato. He definitely does not call it a potato famine. It's definitely not a potato famine. However, there is another video that's been posted up in the last 6 hours by ASMR historian who has referred to it as the Great Famine of Ireland. I have not seen that video as of yet, right? And also on top of that as well, I just want to highlight the fact that it's way out of my field of expertise. But I personally, I would, as a response, I would definitely look into ASMR historian. He does amazing work. So I'm not going to turn around and say this work here is absolute garbage. But I would say turn around and listen to Finn Dwyer's work first, which is the Irish History. So this Irish History podcast. And also on top of that as well is Irish History on YouTube. But his podcast on Spotify, ooh, I can't give it enough thumbs up. He specialized,
yeah.
that's his field of expertise. So definitely pop over there. And also 13th century Ireland as well. While you're on there, check out his work on Fatal Feuds, it's called. He's got an entire podcast on it where he expands and talks about what Ireland is like in the 13th century. Absolutely amazing podcast. So definitely check that out as well.
Okay. Question that's a bit of a left turn. What is she working on? I assume they're talking about me and not
Oh, yeah.
you. So
Well, I'm
I'm
not
going to
working
go.
anyway.
I'm actually, so first off, I'm not a tradwife. I am the polar opposite of a tradwife. I am I am a practitioner of medieval living history and a an amateur historian and a general lover of history. And I am actually wearing a 1470s to 1490s Florentine ensemble
Mm,
as a patrician lady would have worn when she was in the privacy of her own quarters. As you can tell, I am because I've got a tapestry behind me.
mm,
This is home wares, not public wares. And I'm actually, Philip, what is the thing that we reenactors are always freaking doing with our kits,
fixing our
right?
kids,
We're
fixing our
fixing our
kids.
kits, fixing, right? So this is a camicia. This is basically one of these. I have many of them. It's called a camicia in Italian or a smock in 15th century English.
Mm,
Modern costumers call it a chemise, but that's only the French word for it in the 15th century. And it needs repairs. I'm fixing it. I'm fixing all the seams. All the seams have kind of worn away over time, and I'm fixing. Yeah, and I'm also finding spots where the fabric has worn away, so I'm going to have to do some patches, which are a bit more complicated. But that's what I'm doing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just want to apologize as well. Rachel, you got sent money over
Oh,
on YouTube as
oh
well, but that was
goodness.
ages ago.
Oh my
It,
goodness.
it
I am
never
so
went
sorry.
through. That
It
is
doesn't.
by
It didn't show up on me. Gosh darn you! Why are you like this, YouTube or
that was sent
Restream?
over by MQC3852.
Oh,
MQC3852. Thank you so much for those donations over to Rachel's channel on the Creative Contessa. And my guys as well, if you haven't checked out Creative Contessa's work before, definitely please do so. And if you guys don't mind as well, definitely pop over to my channel at Irish Medieval History, where you can hear me ranting and sulking even more about Irish history and the evils of the Scots and the English to my
yeah,
poor people.
those
So definitely head on
bastards.
over there. You stole my cows. People always
You
get mixed
stole
up.
my cows.
People always get mixed up between myself and early modern historians. The running joke, obviously, on the Irish side is the potatoes, but then on the medieval side, it's cows. We're mad
Cows.
into
Yeah.
cows on the
Yeah.
medieval side. Yeah.
No, no potatoes in medieval Ireland, my friends. No potatoes in the Western Hemisphere, or
Oh,
in Europe anyway, or Asia, or
mm,
Africa. All the potatoes in the medieval period in Europe are in the Andes.
mm.
Yeah.
Ooh, which is interesting because we do have ancient empires that are covering South America. So you're saying that there were potatoes in South America during the medieval era?
That's where they come from. Potatoes,
Ah,
and in fact, what they've actually found. And here's you're gonna find this maybe horrifying and disgusting, but also
fun.
fascinating. Archaeologists working in the Andes Mountains have found
Mm.
6,000-year-old potatoes that
Oh.
they were dry, they were desiccated because the
Yeah.
Andes is just a very dry place. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
driest places on earth in some parts, and they actually rehydrated one of the potatoes to see what would happen, and it turned out to be perfectly edible.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Tastes
yeah.
good, or is it horrible?
Yeah, no, apparently first they did microbial tests on it. So
Mm.
no one just rehydrated it and shoved it in their mouth. They were cautious about it, but
Oh,
apparently it tasted okay.
oh, nice. That's really, really
Yeah.
good. That's exciting stuff. It's great to see us because I know this is a problem that the English academics were having, the high level ones were having, especially over on the podcast Gone Medieval, is the fact that the English themselves were very much centralized in England. They were just thinking
Yeah.
about the English medieval world, when
Yeah.
in fact, there's history outside of England as well. And there's different systems as well. This is a problem I am having with the when people are looking at Mongolian history is they're looking at it as a centralized wide land empire that was ran from Beijing across. When myself and Yuki were looking at it as well, and it like the Mongolian Empire did not run like way an English empire would be run with a centralized emperor or king, and then the
Right.
administration going out from him. That's not how the Mongolian Empire
Mm-mm.
worked when they occupied Beijing. How they worked is okay. Don't get me wrong; they did their administration in Beijing, but most of the settlements that pushed as far as Prussia, those settlements ran their own administration. They just needed to pay tribute for a protection racket going from settlement to settlement.
Yeah.
So what the Mongolians actually did is they did not centralize everybody, all these duke, lords, nobles. They didn't do it and then have it centralized all the way to Beijing. Not at all. What they did actually do was monopolize the protection racket going from Mongolia all the way to Persia. And so all those settlements, when they were paying tribute, they were paying tribute for a protection racket, not to
Right.
be under the dictatorship of any Khan in Beijing. That's not how the Mongolian Empire
Well,
worked.
and also I think the part that people forget about when they think about the Mongols is that protection
Mm.
racket was efficient. It
Yeah.
actually created a Pax Mongolica, right? That is
Mm.
actually a term I've heard, and I agree with that, right? There is under depending on the period in question, which part time of the Mongolian Empire you're talking about, it was a pretty stable, relatively safe place for business to be conducted, for people to live their lives. So, it's
Mm.
not just all the horrors of the Mongolian Empire. In fact, I was just reading about the diffusion of someone mentioned the Black Plague, what the medieval people actually called the Great Death, the terrible death, not the Great
Mm.
Death, the terrible death. They apparently, this is really fascinating, the spread of the Black Death, now that a lot of new evidence has been examined, it actually spread from the steppes westward and basically
Ah.
skirted all the way around the Mongolian Empire. They didn't have the plague. It didn't hit them
Mm.
because apparently by
Yeah.
the 14th century they were so relative. They had basically put up these walls. I mean
Mm.
metaphorically. There was a dividing line between the Mongol Empire and not the Mongol Empire, and it was real.
Mhm.
And they'd shut down trade routes to a large extent. And so the Black Death made its way south and westward, made its way
Mm.
all the way up through Europe into England, Ireland, Scandinavia, and then went eastward to hit Russia. The Black Death
Wow.
did not come at Russia from the east, it came at
Mm.
it from the west.
Mm, mm, mm.
And they can actually see in the archaeological record of bodies, there is like this very clear delineation of Mongol controlled area, no plague,
Mm.
non-Mongol control area, plague, which I thought
Okay.
was really, really fascinating. Just read that
That
a
is
couple of
kind
days
of
ago.
fascinating. Yeah, 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 yeah. That's wild. What do you remember? What the name of the article or anything like that?
It was, so I'm on Academy. For those of you who don't know, there's this fantastic free resource out there, a website called academia.edu, and
Mm.
scholars publish their papers there all the time. It's, it's, anyone can publish a paper there. A lot of, proper PhD scholars and researchers do, independent researchers do. And I think the paper, it just came out. It was recommended as something I should read. I'll dig through my email and see if I can send you the link because it was really fascinating. I had I had no idea until I read this really about how the terrible plague dispersed. That was
Mm.
another thing it pointed out. The term Black Death is a post-medieval term, and they
Ah.
think it's actually a mistranslation of the term that contemporaries were using.
Mm.
They called it in Latin the terrible death, the dying, right? Like the
Mm.
great dying,
Yeah.
but the terrible death.
Mm.
And that got translated, the word for terrible got mistranslated as the Black Death. And
Yeah.
then people started filling it in with, oh, well, the buboes sometimes turn black, so that's why it's called the Black Death. But it
Mm.
apparently wasn't actually in the time.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And also, comment section brings up a really good point as well. Is it's also syphilis is that we're rethinking as well. Is not North American virus only strain to Europe. That's a really good point. They recently in England did archaeological work in the
Yeah.
last 20 years or so, and they found, if you look at the
Yeah.
skulls, it was actually a monk.
Yeah.
There was a
Yeah.
monk they found in England. I can't remember specifically where, but he had holes in his head caused by syphilis. My
Syphilis.
wife
Yeah.
actually specialized her degree on syphilis, and that was one of her studies. Was this monk found in England, and he had all
Yeah.
those scars in his head, and you still find those same scars today with people who have become deceased recently, suffering from syphilis. So it is not nice whatsoever, for
Yeah.
sure.
No, it's terrible. It's
Mm.
you can always see someone who died of syphilis in their skeleton. It's gruesome.
No, I don't want
Um,
to
and
anymore.
and I think they've actually found ancient Roman skeletons with syphilis
Oh,
too.
I didn't hear about
Yeah,
that.
I read about this a couple of years ago.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
yeah, the syphilis is not a new world. It isn't revenge for smallpox.
Yeah, yeah. You can have this back. Also, on top of that as well, the comment section highlighting the fact that I should be dressed in more medieval clothing popped up a
Oh,
while ago.
are they saying that, Philip? How convenient.
Yes, yes, yes,
How
they were. But they were
convenient.
also on top of that as well. We're saying that you should have better headphone. What was it called? Because the fact it's a big, bulky headphones, right? Which
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, fair criticism, fair criticism. And it's funny you guys should say that. Because we actually do have a GoFundMe on the go right now. So if you actually want to see me not in an ugly looking hoodie, but actually in 15th century clothing, myself and Rachel are, and bloody hell, I have to get back to you with that one as well,
Yeah,
is do
you
the
do.
into, yeah, I know I'm terrible right now, is into 15th century clothing. If you go over to a GoFundMe and type in help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble, you can actually donate to my clothing as well. So you can get me dressed into 15th century clothing. The one we're aiming for is Seamus Fitzgerald. He has a nice little outfit that we want to put together. So definitely head on over there and you can have me dressed in 15th century Irish clothing. The Irish nobles were wearing down in the south of Ireland. You were saying earlier as well that it was influence, has a bit of Italian, Spanish influences in it as well. Were you,
Yeah, there's definitely if you look at the sculptures, the statues that have survived happily somehow got away from Cromwell's fucking forces, and Henry VIII's forces. You can see there's very clear French influences. There's some potentially Italian connection, although that probably comes via France. And then, the Spanish influences come more into the 16th century. It's in the 16th century where you start seeing the Spanish influences, especially in the sleeves of the lena that the men and the women are wearing.
Yeah.
Right. But in the 15th century, it's very clear that there's connectivity to the French styles and possibly the English styles. The full gowns that have the big, beautiful pleats that are lined in fur and, go down to the ground, conspicuous consumption. A real man, in my opinion, Philip, likes to wear a full voluminous gown that shows how wealthy he is, and also that he can still move gracefully even though he's wearing 20 yards of fabric.
Yeah, we're not. I might put together later on a brat all right for it, but trawls. We're not looking at trawls, are we? Because we're looking at more of, because the Desmond Fitzgeralds are connected to, and this is around the southeastern part of Ireland where they're more or less influenced by the fashion going into the likes of Limerick and stuff. We're not looking into tartan trawls or anything, are we?
Yeah. No. I missed a question. Did I miss something about trowels?
Somebody was asking, are we going to be making trowels? What was it? The late 16th
trews. Yeah. So we're focusing on the 15th century, and it seems. So what do you mean by trews? Are you talking about the trews that are on the Sligo body, the Sligo trews, as I call them? No, we're not going to be making those. We're going to be making he's going to have hosen, and it's going to be like the way that the aristocrats and the Irish aristocrats are actually depicted. So yeah, we're not going for it. But here's the other problem with 15th century. That ensemble from Sligo might be from the 15th century. It might also be from the 17th century. There's a lot of debate about that particular ensemble, because as I've complained about it before, I'll complain about it again, Philip. Your damned your National Museum of Ireland has not done any carbon dating of those clothes. So we have no carbon dating to really give us an idea of whether those clothes that have been found are actually medieval or if they're post-medieval, because Ireland is weirdly both conservative about fashion and forward-looking. So they'll keep wearing sometimes the same things they've been wearing for decades, if not hundreds of years. And then on the other hand, they'll be like, ooh, but we really like this new thing we just saw, so we'll wear that too.
Yeah.
So we can't necessarily go based on, well, it's cut like garments in mainland Europe are cut in the 14th century or in the 15th century, because it could just be that old conservative attitude of, well, we've been making it this way for a while, we don't feel the need to change. Or it could actually be a garment from the 14th or the 15th century. We don't know. What we do know that Sligo outfit looks a lot like that bard, the Irish bard, right, in the Scotichronicon, right? It looks almost exactly the same as what he's wearing. So if we wanted to, yes, we could make that outfit too, and that could be a very reasonable representation of a 15th century Gaelic Irishman, I guess we'll call it, sort of a workaday, middle class, bard class kind of person, right? Rather than an Irish earl. But we're going for Irish earl with this one in particular.
Yeah, I need to find out what this. Do you know what? I need to get in contact with those museums and stuff and see what the crack is. We'll interrogate.
Yeah, right.
Why don't you carbon dirt? But Yuki was saying that it might destroy some of it as well. That's why they're sometimes hesitant to do carbon.
Yeah, I mean, so I absolutely agree. But there's enough of both of the two garments in particular, the two ensembles that I'm thinking of. There's enough there that they could take away enough of a sample to carbon date it that they should be able to, right? Okay. I understand if you've got a piece of fabric this big, no, you don't want to carbon date it because there'll be no fabric left, basically. But the Sligo outfit is a whole bloody ensemble that looks like it was made yesterday. It's in such a good state of preservation that they could absolutely take a patch and carbon date it, and they should. And the Moy gown, there's enough of it there that they could take a patch and carbon date it, and they should. Damn it. But yeah, I agree with Yuki that sometimes no, you don't want to do that because it is destructive, right? Carbon
Yeah.
dating is a destructive process. 100%.
Happy days. Some people were complaining on your side as well that the link isn't working. So what you can do as well is go on to Google, type in GoFundMe, and then just type in help recreate a 15th century ensemble. Okay, so I'll
Hmm.
literally just copy and paste that into your chat and see if that
Yeah,
sounds.
see if that sounds.
So
Yeah.
once again, just pop on over to Google and type in help recreate a 15th century ensemble.
Yep.
Also, on top of that as well, because some people were asking about that as well. Rachel, some people
Yes.
think you need more money for better headphones, so it's more hidden in the future. How
Yeah,
can people support you?
yeah, I guess give me so the problem of course is that any headphones that are over ear are going to be visible.
Mm,
I can't, if I have, it's going to be distracting if I have like little earbuds. I don't know what the options are, honestly. If you would like to give me more money towards headphones, I guess you could PayPal me money.
I've
Yeah,
got
I don't,
everything set up myself
should,
though. Like
should,
I
should,
mostly like a Patreon. Do you not have the Patreon
yeah,
anymore?
I
No.
mean, no, I do. No, it's just like money specifically for headphones. Like, should I start up a headphone fund? If in general you would like to support my work, though. So part of the problem is when I have a guest on or when we're on each other's shows, like we are right now, if I
Mm,
don't have the headphones, then we get this feedback from the sound because I have to hear the sound through the phone, right? So that's
mm,
part of
mm,
the
mm.
problem. But yeah, I have a Patreon. I have the Creative Contessa. I have channel membership on YouTube. If you're enjoying this kind of content and you would like to see me continue making this kind of content, then please consider supporting me through either of those ways. Both membership and subscription, channel membership and patronage on Patreon comes with a whole host of additional perks, access to posts and resources that I don't share with anyone else, access to hundreds of hours of tutorials and videos that aren't shared with anyone else. So comes with benefits. Yep.
Mm, mm.
And I'll think about what I can do about the headphones that still allows me to hear Philip and for Philip to hear me and you all to hear me in a useful fashion. I can come up with something. I'll see if I can I'll see if I can put the headphones under the kerchief. So it might all look guys just be prepared. It might look like I have skull cancer or something. But I'll see if I can cover the headphones with a kerchief or
I
something.
think it
Yeah,
looks
we'll
nice.
see.
Unless somebody sends a lot of money towards me, like if I got that kind of stuff, which by the way, I think it's my hair is covering mine because I've got the same kind of headphones on right now, and I think my hair is covering a lot of it, so I'm not getting it too bad. But what's it called? If somebody asked me specifically to do that there, and they were sending me the money, then I'll be like, yeah, sorted. But if
I'll
nobody
see.
sends me a lot of
Yeah.
money, I'll be like, good luck, good
Yeah,
luck.
I'll see what I can do. I'll see what we can do to make it. I know. You all want the pretty picture of the 15th century patrician Florentine lady. I get it. I'll see what I can do, everyone. I promise.
Mhm. Just heading back into the conversation again, what particular pants do you plan to make for the 15th century Irish ensemble, Rachel?
Right. So we're probably going, we haven't talked about that, but we have a couple of options. We could if you want it. Like this is so everyone I'd like everyone to understand the difficulty of what Philip and I are undertaking. This is not easy. There isn't a your guide to 15th century Irish clothing. It doesn't exist.
Mm,
And because there isn't enough information for it to exist. So we're having to fill in a lot of holes and make a lot of conjectural guesses based on a wide array of different sources of information.
mm,
So we could make fitted hosen like people were wearing in England and France in this era. We
mm,
could make the trews that are in the Sligo outfit, for instance. It does, and they don't have to be made out of plaid cut on the bias, right? It could be made out of any wool, right? So we have a couple of options. So we Philip and I actually have to have a powwow about this.
yeah, definitely.
uh, we definitely do. So there are a couple of options there, and how we go about it will sort of determine the ultimate look of the outfit too.
Mm,
But the thing is that these, and this is part of the problem, is that those kinds of layers, the underlayers, are very rarely depicted in art at all. And Ireland, what's Ireland's big problem when it comes to medieval art, right? What is the thing we keep running up against? What
Well, it
happened to a lot of its art?
It got destroyed by our favorite
Yeah,
Henry VIII. Everybody loves
yeah,
Henry VIII in the chat, don't we? 19, what
yeah,
was it, 1534. And then later on, we have, what was it called? Cromwell. Seamus loves Cromwell. I can see Seamus getting lined up
yeah.
there. Yeah,
Shame,
Cromwell
yeah,
was absolutely amazing. And then, who else did we have later on? Oh, yeah, the Irish Civil War, where we decided the English didn't do enough destroying. We need to destroy some
yeah.
of it ourselves, you know?
Yeah, just set that archive on fire, baby. Set it, let it burn. Right. So we have a relative paucity of medieval Irish art relative to pretty much everywhere else in Europe.
Yeah.
And so this makes it more difficult to assess what the underlayers actually looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Because even in France, where we have lots and lots and lots of art that has survived, the depictions of people in their undergarments, men and women, are relatively rare relative to depictions of people not in their undergarments.
Mm.
So we're going to have to make some educated guesses. We're going to have to conjecture some of these layers, but we're going to do it with the maximum information that you and I can find. And I've found more than I ever hoped I would. Honestly, when I started this whole medieval Irish clothing research that you actually set me on about a year ago, I was kind of despondent, knowing how little there was. But I've, through really hard work on the documentary side, I have managed to find more information. So
Mm-mm-mm.
we will do our best, and we have to make some decisions. So we're recreating the ensemble of an Irish earl in the
Mm-mm.
second half of the 15th century. So he's going to have access to fashions and clothing that your average farmer outside of Galway isn't.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, I just sent that up. Just put that into Google and you can have a look at it yourself. I do love his pants. His pants is one of my favorite pantses of all time. So, like, if you wanted to make that one, I'd be more than happy to make
What
those
pants are we
pantses.
talking about?
The one
Oh,
that's
the
come
Sligo,
on
the bog
yeah,
body. Yeah, the
the
Sligo
Sligo
trews.
one. Yeah,
Yeah, the Sligo trews. Yeah. So
cool.
that's yep. That is a possibility. It's just also, we don't, again, I'll say it again, the Sligo trews may or may not be from the Middle Ages. They might be from the 17th century.
Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. The Inar jacket. So the Inar, Huscrete, that's a good question. The Inar. So the Inar is basically, as far as I can tell, like it's a catch-all word for a top layer. And
Mm.
so what is the Inar evolves over time, just like what is the top coat or tunic in the rest of Europe evolves over time. So it's not like in the 10th century an inad is what in the 15th century is an inad. And so it seems that, as far as I can tell, the inad is actually a doublet, basically. It is what is the doublet in the 15th century. And even in the 16th century, it is what in other places is called a doublet or a pourpoint or a jupon in some cases, right? And so it changes in style. So the inad jacket that most people think about is very much a 16th century. That's what everyone has, all those great 16th century travelers images, right? Like it's all depictions by foreigners. but
Mm-mm-mm.
but honestly, my theory is that it's an evolution of the doublet. And that it's just because the doublet originally comes down to the waist, because there's one depiction I found from the 15th century of archers, and I've shared this with you, Philip.
Mm.
They're archers, and it's unfortunately like a fresco on a wall, and the fresco is not in the best shape, but it's from the 15th century, and it depicts Irish archers, and they are wearing a doublet, what is very clearly a doublet that comes down to the waist, and it
Mm-hmm.
has a little short peplum, a little short skirt that comes down to about their hips, and then they're wearing hosen,
Mm.
and they're engaging in archery, and it very much to me looks like the thing that would eventually become what most people think of as the inar, the
Ah.
16th century, where, and the inar's like this high-waisted thing, right? The 16th century one, it like comes down to just below the chest,
Mm.
and then it has the pleating of the skirt, right? I'm pretty certain that's an evolution of the doublet.
Uh-huh.
an extra Gaelicized version of the doublet. And I think that's a reaction to Henry. It's a reaction to the English kind of increasingly trying to exude power over Irish culture, right?
Mm,
And so basically, people say, "Well, I'm going to be as not English as possible. So how can I accomplish that?" Right?
mm.
My theory is that it's a counteraction to
Yeah.
increasing English control.
Especially when you have the Burkes up in what was it, the Shannon River. Do you remember we had Dr. Melissa Shields on, and she was talking
Yeah,
about the Burkes crossing over the Shannon River to go wiggle their
yeah,
butts, taking off their English clothing and wiggling their
right,
butts at the English garrison on the other
right,
side.
right.
Fun times from the Burkes. Any Burkes in the comment section? What are you doing wiggling your butts? Bum bum bum. There was
Uh, th-
other.
yeah, the question is for arming the doublet, is it for arming or just to look bougie? If you're talking about the inar or the doublet, they're both, right? The doublet is both a civilian garment and a martial garment. It serves a double purpose.
Mm,
Um, and the inar itself, I mean, some of the depictions I've seen look pretty bougie.
mm,
I mean, I've seen in the 16th century, I've seen some pretty fancy depictions where
mm.
there's a whole bunch of embroidery or printed on patterns, right? They're pretty bougie looking. It's
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
it's definitely not the garment of a poor person who's slaving around in the mud.
Yeah, you see, this is the problem: is that people are looking at Norwegian paintings, Scottish paintings, and
Yeah,
Irish paintings, and maybe there's other paintings that you've seen as well, where a person is barefooted because they're in the countryside, and this is
right,
before 1920, before you have the sole on the shoes. So people of this present era will look back into the past, see country people with no shoes on, and assume, "Oh, they are so poor," and completely ignore the dress. Like
right,
some of these people in
right,
Norway, Scotland, and Ireland have some of the most expensive dresses on, but they're walking around the countryside, so they're not going to have their shoes, on because they'll get muddy and they'll slip and they'll fall, so on and so forth. But the assumption that people make these days is it's funny, like, and it's the same thing
yeah,
it's funny because you see the same thing in Japan as well, where you have foot soldiers and stuff, people running around barefoot. And I only seen it recently, and I was like, God, even in Japan, this weird thing happens when you're at a muddy, slippy area where you take your shoes off. I don't know why that is. Rachel, why did they do that? It's so
I mean,
strange.
there's a big movement right now for barefooting, especially we're in Korea right now. There's a
Mm,
big, massive barefooting movement.
yeah,
And there's like, they've now set up all these barefooting paths in the forest, by lakesides, by the rivers.
yeah.
And one of the things I'm a big proponent of barefooting. One of
Mm,
the things that barefooting allows you to do is to use all of the muscles in your feet and your toes.
yeah,
So you have much more control over your footfall than if you've imprisoned your foot in a shoe,
yeah.
right? So, especially in slippery conditions, being able to actually use your toes to grip the mud will
Mm,
make it less likely for you to fall,
yes, that's called a
right?
fact.
Right. And so it completely makes sense. And unfortunately, at some point wearing shoes got associated with civilization
Mm,
and civilized and non-barbarity. And so even though it is absolutely in many conditions way more practical to go barefoot, people won't because that has all of this baggage with it. Yeah.
mm, for sure. Comment section is loving your headphones again, Rachel.
Yeah, here we
Get
are.
that,
Yeah,
get that
yeah.
whip out.
Yeah.
I love how my hair is covering the headphones. So not a single comment tonight asking about the headphones. It's all just go here, here. I just came into the room there. Go get the whip. We'll whip Rachel on. How dare you? How dare you, Rachel?
Yeah, yeah. I will see next time if I can hide it under the kerchief, everyone. We will see.
Before they start putting you under trial. But
Seriously.
regardless, popping back over to the shoes, yeah, I fully agree. Not having shoes on, what was it? Shoes forever? No, get out, get out. Shoes are overrated.
That's
Get out.
so Ryan won't even walk around. He doesn't even want to take his socks off at home.
What?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
barefoot right now.
He has issues.
Oh, it's dumb. What was it called? There was a girl from Limerick I was dating, And even going to bed and everything, she would always have her socks on, and she thought it was disgusting anytime I take off my socks or shoes or anything like that. That relationship did not last long. I hate having my socks on. I'm barefoot right now. Like, I just not for me. Even every see when I pop over to reenactment and everything, I'm one of the first people to go around barefoot night out, especially when I'm drinking and stuff. Shoes gone, don't even know where they are. And on top of that as well, somebody had something about martial arts. Yeah, I fully agree. You see dozens and dozens of depictions with Kerns with no shoes on doing martial arts,
Oh yeah.
and the English criticizing it as a form of being uncivilized. But I think that's very funny, and it shows how ignorant some English city people are, perhaps even in the 15th century, because English longbowmen, there's depictions of them crossing and moving throughout the muddy, slippery areas, also taking their shoes off. So even English longbowmen, and it makes perfect sense for them just to take their shoes off.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe not for knights. I don't know. Rachel would have to correct me on that
Yeah,
one.
no,
Maybe.
you don't want. I mean, here's the thing. If you're in 15th century combat, if you have an unarmored part of your body, that's going to be the first target. So
Mm,
you don't want a fellow knight. You don't want your opponent to take his weapon and just drive it through your naked, unarmored foot,
mm,
right? So 15th century knights are wearing sabatons. They're wearing leather shoes. Generally, they have mail over top of the leather shoes, and then there's a metal shoe on top of that. Because if they didn't do that, their feet would become targets. So
mm.
you don't you don't want to you don't want to expose your foot to that. If you can't walk because someone has driven a sword through your foot, you're done. You are just toast.
Did I
So
say she was from Limerick? Because there's someone else in the comment section
you
as well
did. You
saying,
said she was from Limerick.
yeah. Are you just quoting me back there, or is this the same person? I'd be shocked now if it's the exact same person. But what else do we need
Oh,
to
that's
cover?
pretty funny. There was a girl from Limerick I dated who feet without socks she hated. No, yeah, yeah.
I do wonder if
They're
that's the
just
same girl.
Limericking for you.
Yeah, just the Limerick people. Oh, and my dad's side of the family is from Limerick as well. Yeah, Limerick people, huh? They're whole civilized and uncivilized. Everyone outside the walls of Limerick, the wild Irish. Where are we coming on to now? We've hit the 3 hour point,
We have.
Rachel.
We have.
Ah,
Yeah.
um,
Yep. Okay, everyone. Well, Philip and I would like to thank you all so much for
mm,
supporting us by being part of this live stream today. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you
ah,
are one of my peeps, please go and make sure to subscribe to Philip's channel, Irish Medieval History.
mm.
And if you're enjoying, don't forget to double tap the screen to like and subscribe to all of us. It'd be great. Philip, what do you have going on?
Right. My main thing is this Sunday night, if you head on over to my Patreon, you can go over to my Patreon anyway and have an old nosy. But regardless, the main thing I'm covering this week on the Sunday is I'm starting the Brian O'Neill's Revolt and the Tamad Wars. So if you're into the classic Irish versus English war, that is the peak of the Irish-English war in Ireland in the 13th century, fought between King Brian O'Neill against the English. So if you're into any of that stuff, definitely head on over to my Patreon. It's about 20 quid a month. I do a presentation once a week on a Sunday. So definitely head on over there for that one if you're into that one. And that leads straight on to the Scottish War of Independence as well. So if you're into Braveheart and Outlaw King and all that kind of stuff, I'll be covering it all over on my Patreon. So definitely head on over there for that one. So that's my main thing right now. Rachel, how do I support you if I decided I want to send you money for headphones?
I mean, first off, everyone, I want a pony. I'm just going to put that out there. Okay. I also have a patron, the Creative Contessa, and also YouTube channel membership for those of you who are on YouTube. Both of them come with a whole host of perks, access to extra content. For instance, I just published my recipe for the super successful 15th century Neapolitan cheesecake that we just made in my medieval cooking show on the weekend. Oh my God, Philip, this cheesecake turned out heavenly.
Oh,
It
really?
is it is super delish. It's like on the
Mm,
bottom silky, creamy custard on the top, like what would be a modern cheesecake, but it's
Stop, you're
flavored with
making me hungry.
ginger. And the butter that's in the mixture actually kind of like melted into the crust and made the pie crust just like crispy on the outside and buttery and chewy on the inside. It's
Why are
amazing.
you being mean to me?
So
I don't like being mean. Come on, get lost. I was going to say goodbye to you anyway, but now I'm definitely bye bye, Rachel. I never want to see you again. That's horrible. How could you tease me like that?
hey, dude, you live in fucking Okinawa. Like you are like a 2 hour flight away. You can visit me anytime.
No, I'm very bad. I'm hopping over to Taiwan next month, so I'm really looking forward to that one. But yeah, we'll finish up there now.
Yep.
Other than that, guys, thanks very much, and slán go bhfuil.
Stay
Bye.
creative.